Greetings. Welcome to the Evidence and Reasons for the Christian Faith video channel. I'm Salvador Cordova, and I'm here joined by Emery Moina. For those of you who are not, who are first-time visitors, I'm a former scientist and engineer in the aerospace and defense industry. I'm now currently a molecular biophysics research assistant, and miraculously, my Christian testimony was featured in the cover story of the April 28th, April 27th edition, 2005 edition of the prestigious scientific journal Nature. And we have kind of I've decided to have kind of a somewhat list of topics to cover, and I've invited certain guests to talk. We've had some problems with open mics recently on some of the other channels, and I just don't want to deal with it. And so this particular after show will be geared toward talking to Christians and encouraging them, because this is the purpose of the show, not just to rant and talk. I want to encourage believers out there, especially those who are science students in the colleges. And speaking of which, one of them is Emery Moina. He is a graduate student in biology. So, Emery, just introduce yourself to everyone and tell us a little bit about yourself.
Sure. As Sal said, I'm a graduate student in biology. I'm procrastinating on biology stuff tonight. Well, that's actually not completely true. I did do some work earlier. So I'm working on my master's in biology. My undergraduate degree was in biology. I blog and YouTube and all that other fun stuff. So you can find all that stuff on the In His Image YouTube channel. Just if you want to find all that stuff. So that's me. And we've got John now too. Boy, we're
What's
in
up,
trouble.
guys? How y'all doing?
Pretty good.
Well, what'd you think about that dumpster fire?
I knew it was going to be a dumpster fire, so I didn't watch it.
Hang on. So you're coming to the after show for the debate that you didn't watch. Ladies and gentlemen, I entered this stream. Emery's over there doing a promo plug for his channel. I'm not even going to comment. I can bring anything of value to the after show. I see how it is, Emery. I see how it is, man.
Okay. I know the participants. Like, I know what's going to happen. I don't have to watch the stream to know what's going to happen.
Well, that's very fair. I tell you, I was actually kind of surprised that Rage was actually. Oh, I take that back. I was not surprised because I actually watched his stream that he did right before the debate, and I kid you not, because I have a text message where I sent this to somebody. I really wondered if he had smoked a bunch of weed right before he did the stream before the debate, and then because he ended his 15-minute stream, whatever it was, and he's like, "Okay, I'm gonna let everybody go. I need to go work on my opening statement. I'll see y'all at 9:00." Like, in his stream, and I'm sitting there. I was watching it like, okay, he knows that if he doesn't, clearly he's medicated himself so that he doesn't flip out in debate, because normally he flips out in his debates.
I mean, I didn't watch it, but I'm staying out of that. I just
I thought it was important to engage, and I actually didn't know what these guys were about, and I felt this. What ended up happening is I get contacted and say, "Hey, Sal, we need someone. Can you step up?" I'm like, "Yeah," because James has done me favors before, and I said, "I'm interested in having a conversation about these things." And the more I thought about it, I said, "That's a pretty crazy position." I mean, I really wanted to call them out on their position's a faith position. Mm-hmm. They don't know that, Raging Atheist admitted, I'm 99.99% sure there's no God. And I'm like, okay, so you're going to be really presumptuous and say then that you can't believe in that. So I'm just like, that doesn't make sense. That if you're going to try to oppose something you actually don't know for 100% sure doesn't exist. I tried to point out early in my slide, I showed this black swan because there was a long time in Europe, people said black swans don't exist because we haven't seen them. And I'm like, yeah, that's exactly this whole thing about you just presuming because you haven't had an encounter with God that this is going to be the case for everyone.
Well, and
like that's a real stretch.
Here's we talked about this the other day, Sal, but in my opinion, the premise that you have not had an experience with God is a false statement for every human, because everything around you screams of God's existence. And the very premise of your existence and your consciousness and your ability to look yourself in the mirror and get up and walk around or do whatever it is you're doing to think, therefore I am, is as close to proof, quote unquote, as you can get non-mathematically, right? In terms of whether or not it's the inference of the best explanation that God exists. And this is why I was questioning the rage. Sal, I'm telling you, if you guys watched his video on the Kalam, as scientists, you guys would go into full-scale meltdown. I was laughing. It's a 58-minute video, okay? I was getting so much humor. I was getting full-scale belly laughs, cracking up listening to this thing. That's why I kind of was questioning, like, do you think there's a cause for the planet Earth? Yesterday, in his stream, he went on this whole long-winded, expletive-filled diatribe about how there was no cause for the planet. And like, we see animals everywhere. There's no evidence of them having a cause. And then he tries to extrapolate this out all the way into, therefore, there is no the same logic applies to the existence of the universe. And I'm like, removing the Kalam from the equation, I'm just talking about, as we talked about tonight in the debate, of like, we know there was a beginning. Like, this isn't, like supposition or, theory or whatnot. Like, the evidence is staring you in the face, and it's the scientific evidence that they claim that they rely on, except when it contradicts their positions.
I'll give you one highlight, Emery. I actually broke down and cried during the debate hard. I had to shut off my camera because they're saying, look at all those horrible things that God did in the Old Testament. And I said, what Jesus is trying to tell you, it's going to be a lot worse in the next life. If you're under God's judgment, I said, what you saw in the Old Testament was warning signs. God's wrath is going to be far beyond what we had seen. And they're saying, do you think that's rational? I said, on some level, I wish it weren't true, because they're people I love that didn't make it. And I'm going to cry again, and I'm sorry.
I'll cover yourself.
Okay, Emery.
I was going to say, I think there's a synthesis between John's position, which is, and Sal's, where Sal talked about in his stream, the video he did about the hiddenness of God, where he talked about people respond to the light. People who respond to the light they have are given more light, but people who reject the light they have are, God just says, okay, well, that's fine. You don't have, I'm not going to give you any more. And I think that kind of is the tie-in between what you were saying, John, where nature screams that there is a God. Well, yes, I would agree with you. Nature points to a God. There's the little bit of light right there. And then what you end up with is, okay, people then look at that and go, okay, well, no other people say, well, okay, well, no, there isn't a God. Okay, well, God says, okay, you don't want to accept the light that you're given. I don't give you more. Where someone who says, yeah, okay, there is a God, then God says, okay, I'm going to give you some more, and then see what you do with that, and just on and on and on. Well, so I think that's a kind of a synthesis position between the two, because I don't want to get you to.
No, I would agree with you. I think case in point to that, Amy tried to use the death of the firstborn in Egypt, right? And I'm like, okay, when was that? Let's put it in a timeline. What was the context? Oh, well, God hardened Pharaoh's heart. Okay. Even before the plagues, how many times had there been had the Egyptians been being cruel to the Israelites? Well, we know this had been happening for quite some time, right? Then Moses returns, let my people go. No, plague. Let my people go. No, plague. Like, so this
Mhm.
isn't like it was, 10 seconds later and God said, okay, well, I'm killing all your firstborns because you said no a minute ago, right? Like
Mhm.
time had progressed.
Mhm.
There had been dramatic pieces of evidence that and reasons for the Pharaoh to let the Israelites go, right?
Right.
And then it's like, oh, well, God, and then it's like, from the atheist perspective, God hardened his heart and then killed the kids. How is that justified? It's like, so again, what was the timeline? And
Yeah.
then one more piece. And then even after that, what did the Pharaoh try to do? He chased them with the intent of either killing or bringing them back into an even worse condition, right?
Yeah.
And then what happened? Parting of the Red Sea, and then ultimately the Pharaoh was wiped out.
Yeah.
Because he continued. Not only did he whatever the term would be for what was he at that point? What's the term for 11? He's doubled down, whatever that term would be.
Yeah. I mean, he had lots of opportunities to choose to go, you know what, that's enough. I've had enough. And realistically, even if I'm remembering correctly, and it's been a while since I've read through Exodus, but I'm thinking that some of his advisors and or people basically said, hey, stop. Like, you got to stop. Their God is the real God. We can't do this anymore.
Yeah.
And he wouldn't even listen to them. It wasn't like everybody around him was telling him, no, don't let these people go. If I'm remembering correctly, they were telling him, God, stop. We can't fight this. We can't fight this. But
when I find very interesting about this stuff, and this applies to like the Elisha example. Of course, I always try to find these little myopic examples and like extrapolate it out to like, this means that God must be a completely and utterly, arbitrary, cruel individual, right? In any, microcosm. And it's like, okay, number one, if you're going to try and apply this logic, then no parent should ever correct a child, ever.
Mm-hmm.
That we should have no laws. You should be able to do whatever the heck you want to do. You should be able to rape and pillage with no ramifications. And because otherwise, the law enforcement and the judges and the premise of law and order should be completely removed from civilization.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
But we all know that the atheist is not going to espouse, at least most of them aren't going to espouse like degenerating into complete and utter like barbarity that we once. Sal, Richard can come in. He's good. You probably, I'm sure you follow my point there. I mean, it's like,
right.
If you're not going to go down that rabbit hole, and I kind of made this point in the debate. I'm like, so if God created the universe, if God is the one who made the rules, how then is God not allowed to enforce the rules? Especially when, and kind of case in point with like Pharaoh, many, many, many opportunities are given in order for you to avoid the punishment.
Yeah. I mean,
and
this is
example after example after example after example of this throughout Scripture, and then it's, oh well, God did this mean thing, therefore God is evil. Sorry, go ahead.
Yeah, I mean, this is the equivalent of the Pharaoh thing. Is the equivalent of a parent repeatedly telling their child not to touch the hot stove, over and over and over and over, and each time the child touches the stove, gets burned. And finally, the parent just goes, you know what? I'm just going to, you're going to get some kind of form of punishment for this because you won't listen and you won't learn. Yep. And that's essentially what it comes down to. Like, it's not God being unjust in punishing people for disobeying things that he is absolutely in authority for. I mean, like, he has absolute authority. I don't see that there's any... I can understand from the atheistic point of view if they want to say, there is no God, therefore the supposed actions of this God are not justified. But then they don't have a logical standard for that. They don't have a logical standard of goodness.
And I wanted to add one thing regarding children whom the Lord, subjects to illness or they die. There's a little known passage about Jeroboam's son. Very interesting passage. God said, he's ill, he's going to die because I've seen something pleasing in him, because I don't want him to see all the disaster I'm about to throw. I said,
yes.
So that's an example where God's going to take the life of an infant, not an infant child, I'm sorry. He's going to take the life of a child, the age of the child's not specified, because God was actually pleased with him. And that was an act of mercy. And also, simultaneously, it was an act of punishment against Jeroboam and his wife who had forsaken the Lord. So it's if people read the Bible carefully, you'll get these little tidbits. It's like, oh, sometimes God actually does explain why he takes the life or gives sickness to a child.
Well, and Sal, something that you guys have heard me go on tangents about before, but for any atheists in the audience, the second you realize and you recognize and you comprehend that the next stage of existence is way better than this one. If God is taking somebody out of this, like you were making the point, Sal, of like the cursed stage of the world, right? Okay, so if you're being taken out of the bad place and you've gone to the good place, there was a TV show about this, folks. You've gone to the good place, okay? The real good place, not the fake good place. Yeah. You've actually gone to the real good place. And you're now being able to experience things, and you're not having to face pain or death or sickness or sorrow, all these different things. How is that God being cruel is what I want to know.
Yeah.
Now in the context of, and it's one of the things that I strongly recommend people actually take the time to go read many of the books, not just like the one individual story stuff necessarily, but like the documented studies on near-death experiences. It is extraordinarily fascinating stuff. But beyond that, and this is something that I've contemplated quite a bit in relation to the mercy of God. Right? There are many atheists, people that were hardcore atheists, that had their moment of their quote unquote near-death experience, right? And they were met by Jesus Christ. And they were given opportunity. And their lives were changed. They did not all of them, but many of them did 180-degree pivots and completely changed. Their lives completely changed because of those moments. And it's like, so per their own admission, they went from being hardcore atheists, they had a near-death experience, they were out of their body, they were in another plane, they met with someone who called himself Jesus Christ. They were given a second opportunity, they came back to life, and completely turned the life around and gave it to God. What the heck does that tell you? Like, what is that evidence for? And anyway, my point being that we also don't know what chances God gives in his grace in those moments of truth, and people to I'm not suggesting this is the case. I'm going to go down some like doctrinal deal here, but
right,
we have no idea what God in his mercy gives people the opportunity to do at the moment of death. We don't know what that is, because we think about it from a from a finite perspective. And the reason I'm bringing this whole aspect of near-death experience and stuff like it is many of these people, from their perspective, they were gone for extended periods. They were having very detailed, long experiences, right? That were, from our perspective, were very, very short, right? But from their perspective, there was something, they had a whole bunch of experiences, right? And anyway, I say all that just because I think very often, quote unquote, Christians, right, get these very narrow perceptions of what is the next stage of existence, right? Like, what is actually happening? And then we kind of gloss it into this, very ethereal premise rather than a something I think is much more real. And I think that our next stage of existence, one of the things that Paul said, it's always struck me, especially as I've gotten older, is for now we see through a glass darkly, but then face to face. And now I know in part. Anyway, you guys, I know you know that verse, but the point I'm making is we're actually in the clouded version of reality, not the clear one. And therefore, we don't actually have the understanding of what is yet to come. And I think it limits our thinking.
Yeah,
that's my long-winded diatribe there.
Yeah, and no, John, I'm glad you brought that up because Paul repeatedly calls our flesh a prison, number one, and through a glass darkly, that's all we can see. And I'm glad you brought up the near-death experiences because I've been doing all my postdoc work studying this stuff, the science of near-death experiences with John, it's a whole. I got like 7 or 8 books back here that deal with this, and there is actually a scientific compendium called The Science of Near-Death Experiences. But one of the really fascinating things I've been trying to get hold of is what's called terminal lucidity. And I don't, you know who Jungle Jack Hanna is? Mm-hmm. Okay, well, he's a really good friend of our families. We went to the same prep school, etc. We've known him for years. He is now diagnosed with dementia, and I'm going to be talking to his wife, Susie here. Sagan experienced this right at the end in his last hour of life, that his complete focus and mental capacities came back just before his death.
And saying that's, and I know you know this, but for the audience, that is a well-documented common occurrence.
It is.
It's not a rarity. It's very common for anybody that works in hospice and things like that. It's a very common. Sorry, I didn't interrupt you. Continue.
No. I'm glad you brought that up because that's one of the things I've been exploring and trying to get. And Gary Habermas has explored this as well. He has a book called Beyond Death. Dinesh D'Souza wrote a book about it. I haven't read it, but
I've read Dinesh's book.
Yeah, but it's a very common occurrence. The near-death experiences are absolutely phenomenal. But what it proves is Paul's thesis about through a glass darkly, that our consciousness is held captive in our flesh, and the terminal lucidity proves that the consciousness can be removed from all the neuroscience that guys like Sam Harris, proclaimed that. That's what consciousness is just a bunch of neurons firing. Well, neuroscience is descriptive; it is not prescriptive, and that goes back to another point about the Old Testament. But it's using that as an apologetic, I think, is to come, and I wish it was more disseminated throughout the community, but it's squashed like a lot of ID science is.
Yep, it's completely tossed. And I think one of the in conjunction with the terminal lucidity and a kind of a factor in it as well, at least that I've read about. You probably can fill in more of this concept of there's even documented examples of the person who's at the edge of death regaining their cognitive function and then stating that they're waiting.
Yeah.
That they're waiting for family member or whatever to be, and not just to arrive, but to be ready.
Yeah.
For them to die.
Yeah.
And they'll talk about the fact that they're seeing it sounds like angels, right? Are standing there waiting, like, oh no, I'm going to be fine. Like, it's going to be all good. And they're talking with somebody, right? They, and proclaiming, oh yeah, well, when I'm ready, then they're going to take me onto the next, plane and whatnot. And then, there's this whole thing. And then, it's the kid or the husband or the friend or whatever is, having a hard time with them, accepting the fact they're going to pass. And then when they do, it's almost like an instantaneous thing.
Yeah.
Am I correct on that?
Yeah. Well, the eternal lucidity can last 5 minutes to 10 minutes, but the issue is the full cognitive capacity is regained. President Reagan, and Nancy Reagan talks about this, that he was his old self right before he passed, which is just significant. But I remember, and this is just anecdotally, my Aunt Marguerite, who was my grandfather's half sister or something, right when she passed, and her daughter and her daughter's husband and I were colleagues when I was on a advanced seal delivery system. And it's neither here nor there, but she stated that right when she passed, and she'd been going through some dementia things as well, she turned her head to her and said, "Cal's here," which was her husband. And there are instances like that in that book, but also what are called shared death experiences, where people are not only see an energy blanket rising from the person who has just passed, but they are drawn to it. Literally, they can feel some kind of presence in the room. So the shared death experience is also something that, which is not as well documented at all, but is still a component of using this as an apologetic.
Yeah, and I've read some in line with what you just said there, of to the extreme of the people that are with them having out of body experiences.
Right. Yeah.
And going into like going not all the way, obviously, but like they go with them to a point, then kind of say goodbye, kind of thing. It's like, hey, this is where you have to stop, and then they go on, and then that family member returns. And correct me if I'm wrong on this, but there's also been not just individual, but there's been shared experiences.
Yeah, shared death experiences, SDEs. Yeah, that's what we're talking about. So, but it's.
Well, no, I mean from like multiple people having the same. If it was a hallucination, it would be multiple people having the same hallucination. I guess the point I'm making.
Yeah, and we know that hallucinations are not. And Habermas, I tell Sal this. Sal knows my testimony, but that's why I have a relationship with Gary Habermas, because he explored hallucinations during my Hell Week when I was in SEAL training. I never knew it until I was in seminary and read his book. Anyway, but no, those shared death experiences, and they all don't see the same thing necessarily. There is a consciousness that they experience in that shared death experience. What was the other thing I wanted to tell you about that? I just lost my train of thought, but using that, the near-death experiences, are well documented, but they're all over the YouTube, on the internet. I actually, a guy was a postman who recently had a near-death experience last year. I asked him some questions, and he was, and I said, look, I'm not trying to pry, but have you gone to the International Association for Near-Death Studies and posted your testimony, because it's very important for us to document all of these? And he refused to do so. I don't know why, but his experience as he related to it in his testimony on YouTube was very similar to all the other ones. I mean, there are certain data points that you can take in each near-death experience and correlate them. The golden road, the experiences where you can see in a 360-degree pattern,
yep.
the colors that they'd never seen or experienced on Earth, the music,
and the light coming out of trees and plant, like it's
like
a glow, like the colors are literal light. It's like hey, hold on, it's a plant, but the plant gives off light, kind of thing. Is the one of the things that I've read about.
Yeah. Oh, here's what I was coming to. I think it was. I'm not sure if it was Sam Shamoon, or maybe it was Leighton Flowers. But there are a couple of Christian apologists who are coming out with a thesis that the Catholic tradition of purgatory, there may actually be biblical evidence for it, as well as scientific evidence for it. Now, I don't know where to go on that. I don't want to get into a whole doctrinal, dissertation on that, but it's an interesting concept. And I will tell you that when my sister, my wife's sister passed, that her mother felt her presence, and she was not a believer, but there was a sorrow in the house that she manifestly felt. And it was a sorrow that she could not explain, not because of her death, but a presence. and she said, "It's okay. You don't have to be sorry. It's okay." And the presence went away. So the whole thing is, taking it into, now that it's being scientifically documented since 1975 with this book, is just fascinating. Along with, and it's all guys who were MDs, PhDs.
Yep.
One guy in that book tries to dispel it, but he can't dispel it.
There was one guy, I forget his name. I've got his book. I'll have to dig it up. He was just like dismissing it, and then he had his own.
Yeah. Yeah, there's a couple.
I think he was a cardiologist, maybe. And he was like, "Yeah, I've experienced like people would. I'd say, I'd bring them back, and they'd tell me these stories, and I just dismissed it and rejected it, and then I had a heart attack, and I had my own."
Yeah,
and then it changed his entire perspective. But I tell you something that I found very interesting, and this is where what I'm about to say is why I find the whole problem, or what I think is one of the biggest problems conceptually for humans, is we are forced to think linearly, right?
Absolutely.
And it's like, well, Jesus died for my sins back then, but just like, dude, you hadn't been born yet, so you have to apply this from a eternal, or at least a non-temporal perspective, right? If Christ was anyway, my point is, where I'm going with all this is, some of the ones I've actually found the most interesting are people that were either didn't believe or were adamantly hated God or were atheists and such, and they died, and they were in a bad place, like they were being tortured. And what I found very interesting from multiples that I read, as they were being tortured for I don't know how long, right? I remember, what I remember one saying, like, I remembered when I was a kid to call on the name of Jesus, and I did, and immediately there was a being of light, and
yeah, you're talking about the guy who was the painter, the guy who was the art professor in Europe and died, and he was in a place of complete and total darkness, gnashing of teeth. There were these the evil people that were in there were trying to call him, "Hey, you need to go this way," and he was so petrified that all he did was he remembered in Sunday school singing, "Jesus loves me, yes I know," and he started singing that, and a beam of light came open, and he was saved and brought back to life. And since then, he's was an ardent Christian, and that's a YouTube video as well. So it's very interesting.
Is there a video on that? I'd read multiple instances, similar instances of that in one of the books that I read. Yeah. And that concept, to me, I haven't thought about this in the context of God's ultimate mercy and such. Of it seemed in those instances, right? There are those still, from the stories that I've read on that. There's been entities who have clearly rejected, right? And they're torturing, they're gnashing the teeth, they're et cetera, of the people that are there. They're refusing to call upon the name of the Lord, right? And it's like, so there are those that reject and continue to reject in spite of the fact that they're in that state. But we don't know what mercy God has and what mercy God will give for those who will call upon his name, because the second death has not yet occurred. And that is when this might kind of dovetail with what you're saying about purgatory, right? I don't really have a stance on that. But some of those instances that I've read about they've stuck with me. They've kind of stuck in the back of my head of like, so, I mean, those who should call upon the name of the Lord shall be saved, right? And did God just give people a second chance? I don't know. I mean, it's weird to me in those contexts of where they're giving a glimpse of what the future will be if they don't. I mean, there's so many different examples of what that could entail. But I think, again, from the linear perspective that we think in, it's we might be limiting God and God's mercy to a smaller arena than what is actually available.
Yeah, I mean, we certainly don't want to get into universalism or anything like that, but it is an interesting thing to know what we can think all we want, and you're absolutely right. We can't put God in a box. All we can do is rely on Scripture. So,
Yeah.
But Scripture itself, when Paul says we die only once, well, what does that mean? Does that mean being born again and the flesh is mortified, or does that mean something else? I know, I've had this conversation with guys who believe in reincarnation, and that's one of the premises that they hold. I don't hold to that premise, but it is an interesting thing what happens to that consciousness.
I tell you, I do not hold. I currently do not hold to reincarnation. However, one of the things I have thought about many times in terms of the justness of God, right? One of the main talking points we get from atheists is like, we only have this little short time on life in the world, and we don't believe, then God's just going to damn us to hell for all eternity, kind of thing. And it's like, well, let's just from a hypothetical perspective, let's say that you are given multiple opportunities, right? And let's say you ultimately reject in every single opportunity you're given. Then is God justified beyond any and all doubt for your damnation, if you will? I'm talking conceptually here.
Well, I don't even think it's conceptually. I think you're bringing up a good point that gives me the rejection of Calvinism, because hyper-Calvinism, and I'm going through Institutes right now because I've never read it. I've been a big devotee of Leighton Flowers, and because all of his arguments make much more sense than what John Piper alludes to, and some of the Calvinists will extract themselves out of Calvinist doctrine many times, and go with, they stretch the compatibilist argument to the maximum point, and it begs a lot of questions, and I've never seen. I think I told this to Sal to watch back in I think it was 2011. Jerry Walls and Greg Dongell at Asbury were debating Tom Schreiner and Bruce Ware at Southern. It was Calvinist versus Wesleyanism, and I will tell you that Schreiner and Ware, and unfortunately they were at Southern when I was there, so I don't want to diss them, and they're great commentaries and everything else, but it would seem that they could not hold their position to strict Calvinism because it falls into a pattern of determinism, which would fall into scientific determinism. Mm-hmm. And that's kind of my beef with the deterministic philosophy of Calvin. Now, that said, now as I'm reading Calvin, I'm not even sure that Calvin agrees with total depravity, because in the first pages he said knowledge of God and knowledge of self. Well, where do we get self-knowledge if we are totally depraved? Because that denies general revelation, our ability to see God, know God, and it violates all of those verses which say in Romans 1:18 through 20, it violates all that doctrine that we are so totally depraved we can't, unless God comes down especially and pulls us out. It denies all of that scripture. So it's, I don't know. I'm going down a theological rabbit hole.
Now that we brought up Calvin, I'm sure beyond doubt that Bob is triggered right now. So Bob, what?
Oh, Calvinism is false. I think it's Antichrist. Until a Calvinist can answer my question, does Hebrews 2 say that Jesus was made like us, partaking in the same thing that we took in, the flesh and blood? And then I asked them, does man have a sinful nature? Did Jesus have a sinful nature? They can't answer the question.
Well, Jesus cannot have a sinful nature because he's 100% God. I mean, it's hypostatic union. He's 100% man, 100% God, and lived a sinful life. So evidently he had no sin.
Well, see, the thing is that the Bible doesn't actually, well, at least the King James does not use the term sinful nature. There are occasions where other translations will translate what the word flesh means. The word flesh, they'll translate it to sinful nature.
I
don't
think
disagree
there's a
with that.
difference between being subject to temptation and sinful nature, because you got to think about it in the context of the first Adam, right? Did the first Adam have a sinful nature? No. Was the first Adam subject to temptation? Yes. Did he fail? Yes. And that's kind of the whole premise of the second Adam, right? In this context, obviously Christ is being put forth with the same temptation, not the same, but I mean temptation, and being able to overcome and fulfill the law, which is the whole point, right? So it's being subject to sin's temptation and defeating it versus necessarily having the corrupt nature. And part of the reason that one of the foundational components of the virgin birth is that the sinful nature is passed on by the father.
That's a theory.
It's stated.
Where is it stated that sinful nature is inherited from the father? Where is it stated sinful nature?
I'm pretty sure it states the sin is passed down from the father.
Well, God says on two different occasions.
Hang on. Let me finish my point before you freak out, Bob. The point I'm making is, if what I just said is true, and God the Father is the Father, right? Then the Son would not be corrupted, and therefore would be able to live the sinless life and overcome the temptation and fulfill the law. And like what I'm stating is, I forget the exact verse. What I'm stating is not this isn't a unique thought. Other people have put forth this concept.
I know. Yeah, I've heard it before. But the thing is I just don't see where it says that. I know that in Exodus, he says that I'm the God of Jacob, or the God of Abraham, the God of Jacob, the God of Abraham, God of Isaac, God of Jacob. I am the God that hates those to the 10th generation of those that hate me, but I punish, I believe is the word that's used, to the 10th generation of those that hate me, but reward those, or I think the word is bless those for thousands that love me. And then in one of the prophets, he states that the soul that sins shall die, and that the soul does not inherit the sin of the Father. So there's a difference.
Therefore, just as through one man sin entered the world, and death through sin, so death spread to all men because all sinned. For until the law, sin was in the world, but sin is not imputed when there is no law.
Exactly.
Let's see.
So there was no law until Adam sinned, right? The only law back then, when Adam was wandering in the garden, was don't eat of this tree. The tree being the knowledge of good and evil. Not just evil, good and evil. This knowledge, or this tree, eating of it somehow seems to imply that it imparts knowledge of discerning between good and evil, or the knowledge of what is good and what is evil. It implies that Adam didn't have the knowledge before eating from it, or eat. And 1 John, if I remember correctly, says that sin is transgression of the law. And as you just read, Paul said that where there is no law, there is no sin, or sin is not imputed if there's no law.
So let me ask, I'm trying to stay out of the soteriology debate, but I want to ask a question. Are you saying that, and I did walk away for a second, so I may have missed something, but are you saying that it is possible that that there are people who can go to heaven because they've never been exposed to the Bible? Or is that what your argument is? Because they wouldn't have sin imputed?
Who are you asking that question here?
That's for Argotha.
Yeah, I figured it was for me. I would say it's difficult for me to say with certainty, but it seems like the law exists, okay? And because of that, they can be judged by the law. Now, we have a common saying that ignorance of the law is no excuse, but that's us. Like, does the Bible say that? I'm not sure.
Well, I think that it does. If you look at the book of Romans, where it talks about that the Gentiles who have not the law do by nature the things contained in the law. So in other words, because the law is written in their hearts. So in other words, there's something built into man that tells them what is right and what is wrong, and they know. And I think the phrase is their conscience is either accusing or else excusing them. So in other words,
excusing.
Yeah, which goes back to prevenient grace, which is something that Calvinists deny, that we are so totally depraved that we have no way of being able to right ourselves unless God intervenes or we are pre-selected for that specific grace. The Armenian, or not the Armenian, but the Wesleyan side of that point is exactly what you just stated, Emery, is we have a capacity to see God, all of God's works, but also he gives us four things: consciousness, consciousness, a sense of justice, and the ability to study ourselves, which no other creature has. And so because we have a conscience, and that's why atheists can be good people, they just can't say where these things come from, nor can they state it. And it's why you see little pieces of truth in other religions, not, little pieces of truth. Not that I agree with the other religions whatsoever, but the entire truth is promulgated in Christianity, in the Bible.
Or the other religions just openly stole, like, Islam.
Yeah, well, I mean, you can make a case for Zoroastrianism being stolen from Daniel when they were in Babylon, which makes perfect sense to me because they were both. Zoroaster was a contemporary of Daniel, and most of the ancient writings can't be dated for Zoroastrianism, whereas a lot of people will say Hebrews ripped off Zoroastrianism. The opposite is true. 632 BC, Zoroaster was there in Babylon, and it's clear to me if you read the history of it and what was taken away from that, even though it's a dualistic philosophy, much of it was ripped off from Daniel.
and there you go, another example. But yeah, I'm going to stay well clear of the soteriology because I have people on both sides who follow my particular. So I'm staying out of the soteriology.
Right. And I think something that gets glossed over in
just man up and bash the Calvinists.
well, I would lean toward the Calvinists, so I'm going to defend them a little bit. But I've realized some of the things that Sandy has said is now I kind of feel bad that I've associated with that label. Because I'm a Christian and I have certain beliefs. I'd rather not try to defend some theologian's ideas. And frankly, Calvin did some things that were really distasteful. He was party to what I consider a murder. He was a geocentrist. He said, if you're serving the devil if you believe in heliocentrism. So I'm just like, I just want to distance myself from what other people say.
Well, in line with your point there, Sal, I was making this point the other day. One of the reasons I was in my back and forth with the Trinity Radio guys, Braxton Hunter and them. Which sidebar, folks?
Wait, were you on their channel?
We were talking back and forth, and during their live stream, we were talking back and forth. But I'm actually going to have myself and SJ are actually going to interview Braxton. We're finalizing the date for sometime next week. I actually read one of Braxton's books yesterday. It's a short one. It's Letters from Ignorantia, and it's in the same style as like C.S. Lewis Screw Tape Letters, but it's framing somebody who is like, he's writing letters. There's two characters, and one is in ignorantia, and he's writing a letter to this young man in another part. At the beginning, he's staunch in belief, and he's trying to do the right thing, and he's recognizes the corruption in the church and all this kind of stuff. And then he progressively degenerates into being exactly what he's originally standing against. But it's much worthwhile. I got the audiobook version. It was 2 hours. It's phenomenal book. Anyway,
Well,
the point I was making with him was, but this is a sidebar. I have a huge issue with the entire premise of a denomination, number one. And I think it has led to a dramatic amount of, whether it be an individual theologian, to your point, Sal, or the denominational aspects that have been derived from, them usually. They create these compartments and these lines and these walls around people and the conflict and so many different things that ultimately, in my opinion, lead to a smaller understanding, a limited potential understanding. And then simultaneously, they provide evidence to the atheists that we deal with. If you listen to the atheists, 9 times out of 10, whatever it is they're bitching about is something from some denomination they've had an interaction with. And very often what they're arguing, what they're all mad about, in my opinion, a lot of times, in my opinion, is not even scriptural. It's some doctrinal position that's been extrapolated out into a dogma, and no flexibility, no room for interpretation is allowed. And then we wonder why. It's like giving ammunition to the blind atheist who doesn't understand things from a spiritual perspective. All they see is this this dagger they can use to be like bad theology, bad theism, and then go down their
that's a common tactic. They say there are 10,000 different denominations, which isn't true. But to your point, what they don't understand is a lot of the denominations have different church government policies. They have different ways. Baptism, for example. I mean, there's a classic YouTube debate with R.C. Sproul and infant baptism versus John MacArthur. But more to the point, I'm not here to bash Calvinists whatsoever. I disagree with some of them doctrinally, but I will tell you, a guy like John MacArthur found out during this whole episode of this pandemic who his real friends were in those Ligonier ministry talks, because those guys all abandoned him, and they went with all this CRT crap as well. And I'll tell you that whole Dallas statement, the guys who didn't sign on to that, Al Mohler didn't sign on to it, which really pains me being an alumnus from there. But I don't know. I really have to dig into the Institutes of the Christian Religion, but it seems like a lot of Calvinists have an extra Calvinist philosophy with Tulip, because when I'm reading a Calvin, it doesn't seem to line up.
Well, let me just, for the sake of, I want to clarify some things, because there are a variety of positions here. I at least want people to know where I stand, that I believe that God does extend certain amounts of grace that are substantially more than what he's extended to others. So when he said, Jacob I loved, Esau I hated, and that he picked out like John the Baptist and definitely Jeremiah, before they were born. And that's my position. That would be probably considered Calvinistic, but that's why I resist the label.
Sure.
Like
but it
goes all this other baggage. It's like
a geocentric accessory to murder.
I don't need that.
But it actually goes to John's point of because you make a great point, Sal. Yes, he extended grace to one, but he didn't extend grace to another. He extended grace, special profitable prophet grace, in the Old Testament, only to those certain people. So, but they extrapolate from that only God will choose amongst the Jews and Gentiles after Christ who he is going to save, which goes against Scripture, in my humble opinion.
Well, if I wanted to just, since some people joined and we are talking about the after show, I wanted to throw some highlights. I'm sorry, we can go back to that topic, but I just wanted to share this. Amy had some good points and some scary points. She said she's not a utopianist. I said, good on you. And she's kind of midway on abortion. At least she's halfway there. She said, about the sick and dying who start to believe in God, she's not going to go knock on there and try to undo them of their belief. It's like, good for you, because there's some anti-theists who behave pretty close to that. As pointing out, Peter Boghossian couldn't even do that to his own mother, who was a Christian. But the scary thing she said, well, if all the evidence were there, I would be a theist, but I'd be like Satan. He believes in God, but he's fighting God, because it says somewhere in the Bible that the demons believe, but only to tremble. And I'm like, Amy, those words where Jesus said, by your words you'll be justified, by your words you'll be condemned. I'm just like, guys, do you hear what you're saying? You're just building up judgment for yourself. And then Raging Atheist was kind of close to that too. He said, I'd be a theist. I'd prefer to not be an Abrahamic believer.
So actually, when she talked about Satan, he also said he would serve Satan, and he also doubled down on that.
Yeah, I think
he said what you're talking about on the Abrahamic stuff, but he also stated he would follow Satan.
He would follow. Yeah. See these.
And Argatha, hermaphrodite.
Like a real one?
That's irrelevant.
That's what's been stated. Yeah, not by, like, I'm talking about from them. Not by. That's not like supposition. Let's continue.
Well, I asked in private chat.
Let's just drop that. We don't need to go there.
I asked in private chat.
Let's drop that, guys. Come on.
Yeah, I don't want to go there.
Yeah. But
that's why I answered with one word, and then everybody else was talking about it. You just said okay, and then moved on.
Yeah, inquiring minds want to know, but let's drop it.
We'll save that for Smoky Saints channel, okay, guys?
Oh my goodness.
Okay, there you go, Smokey. I plugged your channel. All right. Every now and then, it serves a real purpose. And I'm sorry I didn't save this. I was saying we're all parts of the body of Christ. And I was describing, people are this or that. And Smokey, and I wish I saved the quote. He said, "I think I'm a rectum." He said, "That's my role."
Oh,
hey, Sal, did you see the video that I linked in the chat?
No, I'm sorry. I didn't see it.
I saw it today. It's a couple minutes long, but I think it's very fascinating. We were talking about. I don't know why it came to my mind. It had something to do with when we were talking about the afterlife experiences, or not the after death, unless you think that they actually died.
Oh, before I forget, you all just carry on with what you wanted, what is on your heart. We were talking about sin. The one sin that has really shocked me a lot that was mentioned in the Bible was Uzzah. He was trying to stabilize the ark, and God struck him dead. I just like, Lord, that one was, I was talking about the wrath of God, and I said, you just don't mess with that. What we believe is good and bad. I said, God's kind of leaving stuff in the Old Testament to tell you, it's like, guys, you don't know what you're doing. And Uzzah was probably well-meaning to try to stabilize the ark, but he didn't do it according to the prescription of how to handle the ark.
They didn't transport it according to God's prescription.
Right. But what I was trying to say is that we can be very well-meaning and not know that we're offending the Lord, because I interpreted that passage to say, this guy probably didn't realize. I don't get the sense that that was a really malicious act, but God struck him down. And there are instances, and we have stuff in the New Testament where people attended communion, but they didn't do it in a worthy manner. Some of them got sick, some of them fell asleep. I presume that they were still, they were taken to heaven, but God kind of like, I'm going to stop this. And my point is that it's very hard for us to try to use human standards to say this was really wrong. The way we know that it was sinful was that Christ died and suffered. When we see that he suffered, then I can accept by faith that we are as sinful as the Lord tells us, even though, from a human standpoint, it's like, yeah, I wouldn't have killed Uzzah, but that's not what counts. And I just, that's something that's hard for people to swallow, that in God's eyes, we're deserving of a lot of wrath, probably far more than humans would inflict on each other.
Well, one of the things that I always find interesting about that, what you're talking about, Sal, and also how it kind of extenuates into the, loss of salvation, all that kind of stuff. I'm like, to me, it makes absolutely no logical sense. If God will remove you from the equation, and by the equation, I mean from this stage of existence, for doing things such as not being clean from a spiritual sense in relation to communion and different things. And we'll go all the way to, we'll punish you all as a child of God, we'll punish you all the way to taking you out of this stage of life. If God will do that, then why would, and that person's not losing their salvation, why would it make sense that God would allow you to lose your salvation when he'll just take you out of the equation if you get to that point? Like I'm saying if you've already been saved. And this goes back to my whole point I was making earlier about the our problems with linear perspective. And we think that God also operates in a purely linear fashion, and when everything indicates that he does not, and can, but isn't bound to the purely linear. And I don't know, I find it rather, in my opinion, it's a rather narrow perspective. It's applying limits to God from our finite perspective in a lot of those kinds of instances.
Yeah.
Yeah, and a lot of the John Polkinghorne, John Lennox, a lot of the guys who deal with quantum physics basically have stated, George Musser, Bernard Hayes, they've all stated that they believe God works in the quantum realm, and that things do not have a linear perspective whatsoever, and quantum physics is teaching us something about that right now, about the ability of when a photon splits, for instance, it could be billions and billions of miles apart, but it can instantaneously talk to it. But it also helps to solve the miracles problem, and I hate to use the word miracles, I'll use the word divine providence. John MacArthur goes nuts when you say miracles, but the incidence of God being able to inject into this world rather than suspend the laws of nature would solve that problem, and he can do that on a regular basis.
If consciousness ultimately is the ultimate necessity for the collapse of the wave function, then the consciousness of God being able to modify energy and matter is not magic.
Correct.
It's completely understandable premise. It
Sure.
is not, and that's why when we hear from the atheists all the time, like, what's your model? How did God prove things into existence? And I'm like, okay, let's think about this for 1 second. If you walk away for 2 seconds, you stop clinging to the extreme Copenhagen, then Genesis 1 takes on an entirely different perspective. Obviously in the language, it's in God said, and it was, God said, let there be X, right? You can say, and God thought, and it was so. God observed, and it was so. God decided to make X happen, and it was so, and that's what happened. That's what occurred, right?
Yeah.
And with what we're now being able to accomplish in our own experiments on the micro level, not just on the very, very small level, but there's been experiments with this premise all the way up to stuff about this. I think the biggest one I read about was about the matter they were being able to manipulate in this context was about the size of a teaspoon. It's no longer on the micro level. That's been for years and years. It was always, the separation between the micro and the macro. Quantum doesn't apply on the big scale, yada, 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 yada. Well, guess what, folks? They've now done experiments where the measurement problem and the observer problem applies, and they've been able to observe it apply on the macro level. Not in terms of huge, I'm not talking about the size of a human. I'm talking about the size of a teaspoon, right? They have done these experiments. And my point being that if we're being able to manipulate things on this level, and why is it any kind of extreme leap for the external consciousness to be able to accomplish the same, just on an even greater level? And then to me, when you think about I forget the verse where it says that God holds everything together, he holds the universe in its place. To me, what's always struck me about that in relation to what we're talking about now in quantum mechanics is God's observation, if you will, is what is literally holding the universe together. And if at any moment he decides to not, then it can just vanish. And to me, when you think about that in relation to the Revelation, right? And
I was just about to say that, yeah.
This heaven and earth just rolls up like a scroll and just poof, basically, and then a new one is instituted. It's like, okay, in the context of what we're talking about now, all right, I get it. Am I suggesting that I would have the ability to do so? No. Would God? Yes. And it does, to me, it kind of takes a lot of the the farting fairies and pixie dust that people like Rage and T-Jump and like to spew. It's like, do you not realize that's not what I'm talking about? I'm not talking about the magic sky daddy in the clouds. I'm talking about things being able to be accomplished under a concept that we, to your point, you're making a minute ago, we're just now starting to comprehend.
Yeah, absolutely. And it goes back to the terminal lucidity we were talking about, and consciousness not being prisoner to neuroscience, to flesh. So,
I don't know what to do. Leophilus is here, and I'm just like, well, he's saying we don't know, and I'm just like, well, we absolutely don't know everything, but the consciousness collapse is been proposed by various physicists. I don't think there's any way that we can rule out. Absolutely, we can't rule it out. So to say we don't know, it's like that we're talking about. It's like, no, no one knows for sure. But you can't say that it's off the table. I mean, this is Leo. I mean, just to tell you something, you're the same guy that was swearing by the Big Bang, and it's falling apart. There's a lot that we don't know, and you're just quoting the stuff that you just happen to be reading, and there are other viewpoints out there. So
have you ever read have you read the Quantum Enigma?
I just want to at least acknowledge that, and I don't want to ban him or anything because he's been reasonably well behaved. And oh my goodness, Danny, I got to explain something to you. I only got 6 slots. So
well, hey, Sal, you can let Danny in. I got to split. I got to get up early for church.
All right.
But, hey, just
hang on, Danny.
Thanks for forwarding that to me last night about my dissertation, because I got a call from one of those said vetted elders who we had a long discussion today about all of the happenings at NBC, and more to follow. Let's put it that way. So
wow.
Yeah.
All right, Sandy, we'll be in touch. And I'm going to let Danny.
Hey.
So welcome, Danny. So I just want to close out some thoughts. It's like, Leo, just hold whatever position you have, but from my vantage point, you're pretty biased. I mean, you're hanging out at a certain channel that will not be named. That doesn't strike me as particularly savvy on real science. I mean, they just do hatchet jobs and avoid what I really say and misrepresent it. And I just stopped watching. But
yeah, you triggered them. You triggered them the other day. So
because go on, sidebar.
I was gonna say sidebar. Have you ever read Rosenblum and I think it's Fred Kuttner? Have you read
Quantum Enigma of Consciousness?
Yeah.
That's and
the reason I bring that book up is one of the points that they make of why they wrote the book in the first place was that quantum physicists, they call it the skeleton in the closet, and that nobody wants to talk about this, or they're so busy focused on whatever their little niche of research is, they're not even contemplating it. And they're just operating from the perspective of, oh, well, yes, because we've been able to prove all this stuff. And in terms of the outcome, technologically and such, we're not even going to address this problem. But there are people who are addressing the problem, and there are people doing experiments, and they keep coming to the conclusion that no, we have not solved the observer problem. And the ones that actually go and do the experiments, that's the majority of them. That's the conclusion, and they're a niche subset because the majority of the physicists aren't even doing the experiments. And what I find very interesting is at least the ones that I've read that have been doing the experiments, the majority of them, they're all coming to the conclusion that no, we have not solved the observer problem. And if anything, there's more evidence leaning towards the conscious observer being a fundamental component, not the opposite. And Anyway, I just maybe we'll close out a little bit of the debate. Amy deflected some of the things that I thought she could have gotten entrapped in, just like the utopianism. And I was really glad. I mean, just as a personal thing, that she's not out to, knock on people's doors and her dying and praying. Just like, that's just so cruel. I mean, not even Peter Boghossian would do that. So she didn't, because she was a lot less militant than I thought. She actually appeared well on the debate for that part. But that stuff about becoming a Satanist, if she had all the evidence, that was creepy. Same for Raging Atheist. And I did say thank you for telling what's really in your heart, because I never heard this for like the last 3 years. People openly saying they'd rather serve Satan. What's up, Danny? How you doing, man?
Yeah, hey, what's up, Danny?
Going back to the channel the person who must not be named. Okay, there was 2 days ago they were talking about you. You did trigger them. Okay, and Speed. Oh, sorry. That person. that person said, was talking about how dumb you were. But then everyone, even his, the regulars on the channel, was like, no, this guy is actually intelligent. And then they started listing your degrees, and then he was trying to undermine your degrees.
I was listening to that. That was hilarious.
Oh, and what I said, well, no, we can't have this. This doesn't fit Speed's narrative. And then I was instantly kicked. Like, it was.
So what was this about my degrees?
Dude, it was hilarious. So initially it was, he's got some weird. I don't think he's not educated. And then like somebody, I think it might have been Pudding. I think he might have pulled it up, and then they were reading what your degrees were, and then it was like, well, maybe he does, kind of, and then it was hilarious. Let's just say there was a very dramatic roller coaster of Sal's dumb, Sal doesn't understand science, to, well, maybe he kind of sort of does. No, he's got fake degrees. Let's find out what his degrees actually are. Oh, well, maybe he does kind of know what he's talking about. Well, he does know what he's talking about, but he's completely jaded. And he's just blind because of his creationism stuff, and he only looks for what he wants to see. And
this is standard. That this is 100%.
He wrote me and invited me to his channel, and I said, well, thank you very much for the free advertising and the courtesy link. I think I won't participate. So I just keep thanking him for all the free advertising, but I really try not to watch. I need to.
Here's what I think is actually happening.
Hey, I'm gonna I'm going to head out too. 1 Corinthians 15, 1-4, the gospel by which we are saved is that Christ died for our sins according to the scriptures. He was buried and he was raised on the third day according to the scriptures. What's
Amen.
that?
Amen.
Amen.
Praise the Lord.
Amen.
Amen.
I thought you were going to say something to me before I went off on my thing.
Yeah, good luck, Agatha.
Okay. Good night, guys.
Well, I wanted to just say thanks for your scripture. God bless you.
You too, bro.
So
Okay,
I think that Danny is attempting to supplant Sal as the most loathed person on Pudding Channel.
I just was banned from there. I was just
Oh, you
banned.
were
So
officially banned?
yeah, well, they banned me on chat. I can't get into the StreamYard links won't work. I used 5 different accounts into StreamYard to just annoy Speed. And then, but yeah, like I'm like a little, I'm like the plague right now, at least to Speed. Not everyone else is very chill.
And it's funny because a couple weeks ago, the other people hated you, and Pudding was being relatively tolerant of you, and now you've alienated Pudding, huh? That's
yeah. I think what we were talking about Platonism, and then he tried to insert his view, like respond to me, and I said just let the adults talk, and then he kicked me. He kicked me out and banned me.
And
that's all I said.
And for the record, I think just tying this back to the debate, you're not an anti-theist. Seems to be a lot of atheists who are not anti-theists.
No, that's actually a very uncommon view amongst atheists. I just did a video on it today. I reviewed The Raging Atheist because some guy named Justin converted to Islam.
Yeah,
and
I was calling him out about that in the debate.
Yeah. And
quick sidebar before you continue, Danny. So, since you reviewed those videos, would you say it's fair to make the assertion that the Rage was not exactly being nice in relation to that guy becoming a Muslim?
Oh, no, he was more than just not being nice. He tried to give an argument against the Kalam, and it was just embarrassing.
Danny, so did you see any of the debate tonight with me and Sal?
I only saw bits and pieces of it.
Okay. So there were different instances throughout the debate where I kept like making references to what his streams for the last couple of days in relation to the empathetic atheist Justin becoming a Muslim, and then okay. In relation to the Kalam, have you seen both of his videos on the Kalam, like his short one and the long one?
On the Rage,
yeah.
Oh no, but I don't want. I couldn't do that to my ears.
Okay. So which one did you watch? Like the 13-minute one or the 50?
I watched. I think it was the 13-minute one. Was that released yesterday or today?
It was. He did both of them yesterday. I think it was.
Okay,
well, I saw a short one, and then there's a long one, like an hour. Okay, dude, the short one was bad enough. The hour one, oh my lord, I was laughing so hard, and just being like, did I just hear this? Did he just? I mean, okay. So I'm yelling at my phone. Okay, it was just crazy. It's epic, but. It's like I cannot believe I'm hearing this stuff.
So bad. It was so bad. But he's an anti-theist, and then there was a point. I mean, it was so ironic too because he started sounding like one of those TV preachers. He sounded like literally like he was trying. We have a cause here. We have to. It was just y'all gotta watch it for yourselves.
It's so bad. It was so bad. All I gotta say is when he was talking about the animal, I brought it up in the debate. Like jabbed him. He tried to dodge, so he was dodging, and then he actually kind of catered to his original position for the streams at one point. But he's like, "What's up with this whole Kalam thing? Like, yeah, so like we don't know where all the animals came from. That doesn't mean they have a cause." I'm just like, what?
Yeah, I remember that. I heard that. I was like,
and he's like, and the earth, like gravity and like dust and it like turned into the planet, but that's not a cause. What What do you mean that's not a cause? Like that's literally the cause that's being suggested for the formation of the planet. Like you're now saying that's not, and then it like extrapolates it all the way out to like
Name
the Big Bang.
the
And like, I don't think there actually was a cause for the Big Bang. Like, what about the universe makes you think that there was a cause? And I'm like, I don't know. Like everything about the Big Bang model, just for as an example. Like what the heck do you think the point of the many worlds interpretation? Where do you think that came from, you idiot? It was an attempt to circumvent the premise that, oh wait, steady state's no longer valid. We got this growing evidence for a Big Bang. Let's go with many worlds interpretation. What was that? Was it Hubbard?
Hoyle.
No, it wasn't Hoyle. Who did the first many worlds? So it was it was Hubert. Anyway. My point is like my mind was blown of
his channel
don't make these arguments if you don't understand like something.
Right, he doesn't understand any of the arguments. His channel should be renamed as the Raging Clown Show. It's a clown show. I mean, he's a clown, right? And I mean, look. First of all, I think the Kalam argument. I think that's good apologetics, meaning like there's a lot to engage with there. There's a lot of there's still talk about it going, in philosophy, religion. It's a live debate. It's a good argument in the sense that it's something to respond to. You can't just hand whatever he just did not do any of it justice, right? And that's why I'm saying the things I'm saying, right? It's just the guy is ignorant and irrational, like absolutely irrational.
I want to another sidebar, and just because someone got triggered and they're questioning my degrees, look at the Nature April 27th, 28th, 2005 edition. It will list my first 3 degrees. That was in 2005. I got 2 more after that. So you're going to have a hard time just saying I don't have even one.
Well, but it doesn't.
So these people
had to lie to get those degrees. So they're not any good. You're a creationist. You can't possibly understand science. It's just how it works. You're not.
That's how it works. I just wanted to say it's on record in the prestigious scientific journal Nature that in 2005 I already had 3 degrees. So I mean, just think about that. You know what I'm seeing here? They're so biased. They'll be skeptical about all this stuff. They're not very skeptical of their own ideas, which we just poke holes. I just gave up. I know this will sound mean, but the speed of stupidity is accelerating through certain places in the internet, really.
And so people actually thought that when you listed off your degrees in your videos, you were just like lying about it or something. They actually had to like look it up. They just didn't trust you enough.
If you have any,
if you want, I mean,
Godzilla, if you have any conclusion that is not the standard dogma of consensus, then you can't possibly have a degree. You can't possibly have an IQ above a gerbil. And even if you do, you must clearly be incapable of rational thought because you're blinded by your God of the Gaps mindset. I mean,
and if people doubt that I went to Johns Hopkins, I'll send them an email from my lifelong gift of an alumni account from Johns Hopkins. You'll see it right there in the edu domain. I mean, come on, guys. I mean, this is kind of hilarious. You're going to these lengths. Because I happened to talk to, who was it? Andrew Cumming. And I spent about 3 hours talking to him about science. And I'm really hoping that it's like, oh my goodness, Salvador knows how to do phylogenies. He understands our language. And why isn't he persuaded? That probably got under the skin that he was spending time actually hearing. I felt that I gave more good science to Andrew in that 2.5 hours than what he usually gets over in that channel where you have some guys like John Peterson, Jerry Penna. And need I list more? And
don't forget Cygnus Eustis. Cannot forget Cygnus.
And I wanted to say, you guys are questioning me. Why are you spending time on some high school dropout who's kind of I'm not going to get too personal there.
I found the
I mean,
clip. Sal. I found the clip of him talk, like this whole framework about how he construed urine degrees just utterly shatters, and then I say that snarky comedy boots me. It's so funny.
So
Do you want to
if
see
Danny's
it?
going to share it, you should what? This is hilarious.
Okay,
Okay.
okay. Let me get.
one
I have it
second.
here. It's just
Do
one.
these
little
people
video.
not realize how bad they would look once you pull out that I actually have these degrees and it's like really easy to verify it?
Oh, as if, okay, guys. Well, hang on. I don't want to.
Sal has done many streams on my channel with the camera set up to show the degrees above his fireplace. Like, I mean,
I don't know. I can only count with my fingers, but I think I see 5 up there.
I have the clip there.
No,
Sal.
Emery, those are clearly forgeries. You're able to tell from this distance that those are clearly forgeries.
Yeah, those are just blank. They're just some printed pieces of paper that are framed. nothing real about them.
Oh yeah, totally.
Yeah. So, ladies and gentlemen, in the era of modern employment, there's systems where you can like go online and like search and make sure, like verify somebody's degree.
Here's an offer. You guys really want to take me down? If you guys really want to take me down, you can accuse me of fraud because I'm claiming this is not a forgery here. You see the name of that university in the name of the school and the degree that I was awarded in the signatures there? I mean, that's a big deal if you're saying that I forged those signatures. You want to cause trouble? You want to take me down? Go ahead.
Yeah,
Hey,
let me
Contact
take
the university and try to have them not verify that degree.
Okay,
But
so
to do that, I want you guys to, if you find out that I'm for real, you better tell the world and not keep it to yourself.
Good luck with that one, Sal.
Okay, let me play the clip, Sal. I have it here. It's very short. Okay, ready?
Or something like that.
Something like
Well,
that.
well, standing. I would like to debate you. Erica pretty much humiliated you standing, and I'd like the opportunity to or the same.
Like she did humiliate him. I mean, hands down.
Who hasn't?
I mean,
Does Sal have a master's in like aerospace engineering or something like that, or like some form of physics?
You have
Who?
yet, Leo?
who has a what and where now?
Sal has a master's degree, I think, in like physics.
You're muted, Danny. So, like, if you're talking,
Oh, I was a few seconds off. Give me a second. I have it right.
they just come in.
They just said it. Yeah. Okay, so we'll start. Here.
Erica pretty much humiliated you standing, and I'd like the opportunity to or the same.
Like she did humiliate him. I mean, hands down.
Who hasn't?
Me.
Doesn't Sal have a master's in like aerospace engineering or something like that, or like some form of physics?
You have
Who?
yet, Leo?
Who has a what and where now? Somebody's
Sal
getting
has a master's degree, I think, in like physics of some kind.
Sal has a master's degree in applied physics.
Is it a master's or is it a bachelor's?
Sal has a master's degree in applied physics.
Does he really?
That's impressive. That's not nothing.
The guy is not stupid, so I mean,
Right. I've never actually thought that Sal was stupid.
Oh, that
No,
doesn't speak Pete's narrative though. So
I thought he was just disingenuous.
that was it. They eventually review it, but I said right there. You see, my tag is no longer there. My video is no longer there. I said that doesn't fit Speed's narrative because Speed's narrative is that you're stupid, right, and that you're not qualified to talk about what you're talking about, and and then he got really mad and banned me.
So, like, even Leo is better than these guys.
Yeah.
So, Sal, in line with making propositions with prove or disprove your degree. When I was in college, so for those of you who don't know, I was born and grew up in the United Kingdom. So I'm an American citizen. I sound American because I grew up on 3rd Air Force headquarters, American parents, all that stuff. Sound American, but I literally was born and lived the first 18 years of my life in the United Kingdom, right? So come back from college, and I'm quite the party animal. and throw crazy bashes at my house. Anyway, at some point, somebody would always ask, "Where are you from?" And then I would spend freaking 15 minutes explaining like why I was actually from England, right? Well, one night, some goober decides that I must be. I'm sitting there talking to this hot chick, and this brought up. Anyway, he decides to come over and he starts accusing me of making things up, and that I was just trying to get laid by telling this chick that I was from England, also that kind of stuff. Well, it then turns into this whole back and forth, and I'm like, I'll bet you $1,000 that I can prove beyond doubt that I was born in the United Kingdom. And I'm just to make him go away, right? And of course, I'm throwing a party, so I've got tons of money from like beer cups and stuff. I'm like, here's my money, bro. Like, unless you're gonna back yours up, go away. Well, he leaves and goes and gets a bunch of his buddies. They pool their money together and come back, and they're like, okay, prove it. So I proceed to go into my room. I had a safe, and I like open it up, get my birth certificate that's like signed by the U.S. ambassador in London, like issued from the U.S. Embassy, London. I bring it out, and I'm like, "Here's mine," and thank you, gentlemen. So I scooped the money, and then let's just say that there were many occasions after that one where I used that tactic, but instead of letting somebody get to, it'd be their idea, I would like manipulate people into betting me that I could prove beyond doubt that I was born in the United Kingdom. And let's just say it funded more than a few of my my college era shenanigans.
Sidebar, Stephanie Trenton, you're gone. I'm sorry, you do not get to get up there and claim that Sal has forged his degree after he showed it to you. Goodbye.
I have no knowledge of being true or false. Just stating, for a small fee, they can be made for you. Yes, they can. Okay, so apparently atheists are just so dumb. Okay, seriously, no, Danny aside, let's say YouTube idiots. Okay, in case you weren't understanding, the point that I was just making and Sal was also making is that we're able to back up our BS.
Yes.
And in my context, and I'd wager Sal, because Sal's also a bit of a gambler, he would also be willing to put money on the line because it's not a bet, you freaking idiots. Like, I know, we're talking about card counting. It's like, I know beyond doubt that I can prove this case that you're saying, you're making the claim what I'm saying is false. I know 100% that I can prove it beyond all doubt. So let's go. Let's bet, because it's not a gamble for me. It's a guaranteed win. So let's do it.
And it's like when there's one card left in the back.
Yeah, and like, God, I didn't mean to argue with you, interrupt your thing, but I'm sorry. Like, there are limits to like the garbage that I'll let people spew.
Well, thank you. I'm going to let the mods have. I gave them that privilege, and I'll go with it because I don't have time to deal with this, and that's why. Oh, now you know, Danny, why the policy came in place. I just don't want to be fanning the flames and getting them over on my channel and just.
Here's the real bet, though. Who wants to bet that the probability of either portions of our debate and or portions of this stream will be covered in the next weather report?
Oh, I wouldn't take.
Oh, absolutely.
I mean, here's the thing. You know what? Here's what I've noticed though. When I make statements like this, usually it's not the next weather report. Usually, because I've made a claim like that or made a statement like this, usually it's not the next one; it's the one after the next one. Like, it's like, oh, I don't want to do this because then John will get to be he'll lord it over and gloat about the fact that we did do it. And I don't think that I don't know if y'all saw my the meme I did on my community page about the weather report being for special people. I think that really triggered Pudding, and I think he's been taking moves that I think he's starting to recognize too that they have no inspiration of their own for content. The only thing they have is either Sal, Emery, my stream, when Danny pisses them off, and there's like 2 or 3 other people. but that's it. They don't have anything actually unique for themselves. It's amazing.
Oh, they've been going after my stuff now. I didn't even pay attention to them.
You know who's actually kind of a moron too? Is it Cerberus Rex guy? Do you know who I'm
Dude,
talking
Cerberus Rex is one of the biggest idiots. Yeah,
He's a
that guy.
moron.
Okay, he calls everybody child and boy, right? Today, so he's an atheist, right? Who claims that we're all horrible. Let's just say that he asked if I was having problems with my throat due to insertion of different things, shall we say? And it's like, shouldn't you, even if that was the case, shouldn't you be tolerant of that from your own worldview? He's character. I think he has dementia, and then because he goes into he like disappears for a couple days, and it's like when he returns to talk more trash in comments, it's like he forgot everything that happened from the last iteration. I really think he goes into has some electroshock therapy. They let him out. He comes back, talks some trash, gets all worked up again. They have to go to give him more treatment.
Well, gentlemen, we've had a lot of fun. One reason I try to minimize talking about Speed of Pudding, he's just a fun topic to laugh at. I mean, we get a lot of laughs, and we could get really addicted to just trashing him. And I'm like, I do want to try to not.
Yeah, we can change topics. It's good to change topics.
Yeah. So, as this is a sincere compliment that Amy was not a utopianist. And I'm like, yeah, I maybe not have given her credit enough for at least thinking through a few things, because I tend to lump some of these people all in one lump. And I was actually pretty impressed that she's not a utopianist and she's having some reluctance about abortion. Notwithstanding the fact that she said she'd rather be a Satanist if she found out about God. I'm just like, that kind of dwarfs everything else. But one thing I had on my mind when we were talking, and I was saying where anti-theism goes, because I thought she's, they were advertising, she's talking about all the harm theism does. And I wanted to say, life in the United States, I would take this over the USSR over the last 400 years. And these state-imposed atheism and raging atheists came in and said, "Oh, that's not the same thing as anti-theism. That's state-imposed atheism." I'm just like,
isn't, I mean, not to go back to he who shall not be named, but isn't that exactly what they want?
Yeah, and I wasn't going to go there. I was going to give them a chance to speak for themselves.
Nice, Emery.
And I wasn't going to rush to judgment because I just didn't know. And maybe they're at least wise, and I don't know about raging atheist. So I sincerely don't know, but the attitude of, I will say, a lot of anti-theists is exactly that state-imposed atheism, and we see it playing out in the court systems in the way they're treating Christians. Of course, it's always guised in guised in kind of like, it's freedom of religion. That's why we're stamping out Christianity, something like that. But what I was going to share was what happens. She's talking about all the harm that Christianity, or she's going to cite the Muslim behavior, but it's like, oh, so you don't want to cite what happens in the United States, because it's kind of hard to compare what's happening. She's talking about the suffering. I'm like, look what happened under Mao Zedong. And I was saying that if you don't have appeal to higher morals that proceed from, like, say, a creator, the humans become the arbiter of what's right and wrong, and it doesn't end well. And I said, you just compare it. I said, we have empirical evidence that eliminating theistic beliefs, particularly Christian beliefs, especially Christian beliefs, is not good for a nation. So this mango fever, this is just from Wikipedia, and I'm glad it actually reported it. Mango fever. And I talked about this in my debate. Let's see if I have it here. Mango fever. In the spring of 1968, a massive campaign that aimed at enhancing Mao's reputation began. A notable example was the mango fever. On August 4th, 1968, Mao was presented with about 40 mangoes by the Pakistani foreign minister, Syed whatever, in an apparent diplomatic gesture. Mao had his aide send the box of mangoes to his Mao Zedong propaganda team at Tsinghua University on August 5th, the team stationed there to quiet strife among the Red Guard factions. On August 7th, an article was published in the People's Daily saying, in the afternoon of the 5th, when the great happy news of Chairman Mao giving mangoes to the capital worker and the peasant Mao Zedong thought propaganda team reached the Tsinghua University campus, people immediately gathered around the gift given by the great leader, Chairman Mao. They cried out enthusiastically and sang with wild abandonment. Tears swelled up in their eyes, and they again and again sincerely wished that our most beloved great leader lived 10,000 years without bounds. They all made phone calls to their own work units to spread this happy news, and they also organized all kinds of celebratory activities all night long and arrived at the National Leadership Compound. I can't pronounce it, despite the rain, to report the good news and to express their loyalty to the great leader, Chairman Mao. Subsequent articles were also written by government officials, propagandizing the reception of the mangoes. And another poem in the People's Daily said, seeing that golden mango was as if seeing the great leader, Chairman Mao. Again and again, touching that golden mango. The golden mango was so warm. Few people at this time in China had ever seen a mango before, and a mango was seen as a fruit of extreme rarity, like mushrooms of immortality. One of the mangoes was sent to the Beijing textile factory, whose revolutionary committee organized a rally to the mango's honor. Workers read out quotations from Mao and celebrated the gift. Altars were erected to display the fruit prominently. When the mango peel began to rot after a few days, the fruit was peeled and boiled in a pot of water. Workers then filed by, and each was given a spoonful of mango water. The Revolutionary Committee also made a wax replica of the mango and displayed this as a centerpiece in the factory. And here's, I guess, a picture of this with this poster. And there's Chairman Mao, and there's the mango. There followed several months of mango fever as the fruit became a focus of a boundless loyalty campaign for Chairman Mao. More replica mangoes were created, and the replicas were sent on tour around Beijing and elsewhere in China. Many revolutionary committees visited the mangoes in Beijing from outlying provinces. Approximately 500,000 greeted the replicas when they arrived in Chengdu. Badges and wall posters featuring the mangoes and Mao were produced in the millions. The fruit was shared among all institutions that had been part of the propaganda team, and large processions were organized in support of Zhengui Lipin, precious gift, as the mangoes were known. One dentist in a small town, Dr. Han, saw the mango and said it was nothing special and looked just like sweet potato. He was put on trial for malicious slander, found guilty, paraded publicly throughout the town, and then executed with one shot to the head. And I wanted to say, this is what happens in state-imposed atheism. I would trade what we have in the United States and in Europe for that. And we could say the same thing happens to some degrees in other places, like, say, North Korea and
well, we know beyond doubt that it happens in North Korea. I mean, he publicly executed his uncle. I mean,
with an anti-aircraft gun.
Yeah, I mean, his sister has been executing people. I mean, it's like, didn't he kill like a half brother too? I think.
Yeah,
anybody who's a threat.
Poison.
Yeah, I mean, it's like, this isn't exactly a hidden premise here. You know, like, it's done, and it's not to say there aren't other places where people get executed. I mean, let's get real. There's people that get taken out here in the United States too. Seth Rich, anybody? Sidebar. Did y'all see the FBI, that we're coming up on what, like 6 years now? The FBI once again requested a delay in the Freedom of Information Act request that they've been ordered to comply with. And they've been delaying for like 4 years now. Anyway, the level of corruption on a global scale. I mean, the corruption is getting to such a degree that anything is possible. And the corruption in the United States now is on full display. I mean, it's reaching level of our collapse. One of the things that we were just reading about was under the main title of the cultural revolution.
Oh my goodness.
And the United States is on a beeline for a quote unquote cultural revolution. I mean, we're on a absolute 100,000 mile an hour trajectory towards it.
Yeah.
The fact that Biden just issued an order for court packing, like basically everything that he promised. Oh, I won't do that. I would no. Don't be paranoid. That's just a bunch of propaganda. I would never pack the court. No, I would not use executive action on unconstitutional moves on the Second Amendment. I would never do that. I mean, really? Well, you did both of them in the same week. I mean, it's
that same guy who said executive orders are dictatorial, and he signed some. But the point is that I was hearing Raging Atheist and Amy. I was like, you guys are really straining to find examples that where Christianity caused so much harm to people, compared to, like, say, Red China and the USSR and North Korea and.
Well, and she tried to use like the Inquisition. That's why I knew it was a very small number. I'm like, oh, it's 32,000 in the entirety of the Spanish Inquisition. Yeah. And so you're going to go and like try and toss that as like an example of just the horrific, horrible things that were. Again, I'm not defending the actions of the Spanish Inquisition, and I've publicly bashed the level of corruption and just the outright debauchery of many of the popes in that era, and the bishops. I mean, they were corrupt beyond all doubt.
Yeah.
But they were using things to their own advantage. They were manipulating things. It's known, like, how are they getting away with a lot of this stuff? Oh, wait, people were illiterate. What was the point of the Protestant Reformation? Why was the invention of the printing press and the translation of the scriptures into English and German and other languages, why was it so significant in enabling the Protestant Reformation to happen? Oh, because they were no longer able to hide behind Latin. Like, this is, well, it may not be known by a lot of these atheists, but that's the fundamental component to all of that. And how did the Renaissance happen? Oh, wait, it was just sparked by this. I mean, anyway.
And then and it's like, you guys are, I thought it was not the best historical comparisons. It's like, you look at the life under certain Christian nations, especially like the United States, it was really good. And that the reason I read this thing about Mao, up until recently, this was unthinkable in the United States. It's because of the Christian culture. And some guys in the chat were saying, oh, this wasn't a Christian nation. And I'm just like, yeah. Why don't we look at how many Christians there were that signed the Declaration of Independence? How many of them had seminary degrees?
They were deists. They weren't actually Christians.
No, yeah, just speaking about the side chat, I think that, John, you might be the most hated person by the MDD chat.
Oh, I think so.
That's
I
pretty. I think that's true.
I think I have claimed that status for sure.
Like,
Now that since Smokey stopped doing debates there, at least for right now, he was the most hated. And then he and I used to battle when we were doing tag teams. We're kind of going back and forth on who was the most hated. And then he's gone, and I'm pretty sure I am the most hated right now. And
Do you feel like?
And I've also told them in Q&A sessions, I have told them that I freely embrace that title.
Yeah, that's what I was going to ask you. Like, do you feel? Is it one of those things where, like, oh, this confirms I'm doing something right? Is that
100%? I willfully embrace the most hated title on MDD, no doubt about it. The irony is that a significant portion of the trash talkers on that channel do not comprehend 95% of what I'm saying.
Yeah, and then they call it word salad as if that makes them sound smarter.
Yeah.
Yes. Sal, the other night I was on an atheist show, and this goes back to the point I was making in the debate about how very often a lot of these folks, when you listen to them go on their little wine sessions, they're bitching about a denomination, not theism. They're mad at a at this church, man, therefore no God, right? They're not actually arguing from any kind of intellectual perspective like Danny does, right? And so this one guy comes in and he's like, I'm Mr. Science. Like, so I started asking him some basic questions. I was like, so do you think, right, have we solved the universal wave function? What's that? What are you making up? And then, as you just said, I was accused of using word salad. Then I asked him about the probability bound. Again, you're making I don't know what that is. I think you're making things up. Speak English, like translate that into English. I'm like, I just listened to you go on a tangent for like 15 minutes about how you rely on science, and I go and read all of these things and learn all this stuff, but you don't know some of these like basic concepts that should be applied in this supposed understanding you have, and at least from a perspective of being able to feel confident in your rejection of God from a scientific perspective. But then per your own admission, you don't understand what I'm saying, and you accuse me of using word salad. Got it.
Yeah, I think the lack of awareness is just staggering when you read and they're saying like, oh, John's saying a lot, but he's not really saying anything. It's like you're literally not understanding the points that he's making and you're proud of it.
Well, I mean, to be perfectly fair, in their minds, he's not saying anything, but that's only because they are ignorant.
So you're saying that it's a matter of special relativity, and from their relativity, it really is word salad.
Oh, no, okay. I'm not saying they're right. I am not saying they're right. I'm just saying that they don't understand, therefore they think it's word salad. It's just revealing ignorance. It's not revealing that they actually know what they're talking about.
Okay, so Michael, so he just asked a question inside chat. Danny, why did you change your self-reference from agnostic to atheist? That's my fault.
Yeah, I like the agnostic title because it's like I like theism. Like I if I find an argument for it, I'm gonna be there. But like, so I just labeled myself as an agnostic. But I think that LPP really doesn't like people that kind of just sit on the bench in terms of the theism atheism debate, right? So when I came into server, I just identified as an atheist.
Now, see, Danny, I don't have a problem with agnostics. I have a problem with atheists or people who claim to be atheists, but then want to define themselves in the way they describe themselves is a freaking agnostic. It's like, okay, if that's what you are, just call yourself an agnostic. Don't call yourself an atheist. You're an agnostic.
Yeah,
that's my point.
Or you got the opposite, where they claim to be agnostic, but they're doing all this like atheist activism stuff.
Right, or the reciprocal.
Oh yeah, that I just the reason why I was comfortable taking the labels because I know how to argue for atheism and I take those arguments right. So it suits me. I'm not one of those people where like I don't know, so you're gonna have to do all the work to show me why theism is.
So John just mentioned the universal wave function. I want to, this is one of the things that get missed. Is like some of the people on the other side, the anti-theists, is like, I've not seen any proof. It's like, well, how deeply did you look? And how much would this change your meter? Like if you're 99% sure that there's no God, would this move it at least a percentage point lower? And this was a peer-reviewed Oxford University Press book by Barrow and Tipler, and it was actually featured in the prestigious scientific journal Nature in a review because they thought it was significant. And so the title of the book is The Anthropic Cosmological Principle, Oxford University Press, 1987. They take the claim is intelligent information processing must come into existence in the universe, and once it comes into existence, it'll never die out. Now that's they have kind of a strange kind of theism, but they derived it from Schrodinger's equation, and you get the universal wave function. But this is a very so this universal wave function predicts through physical first principles alone. At the end of time, there must be an intelligent entity that is conscious, all-powerful, all-knowing, non-material, eternal. Those were Tipler's words in one of his talks. And I'm just saying, by all counts, such an entity would properly be called God. So I put two things in the debate tonight. I said, this didn't come from creeds. This came from inferences from the laws that we use to do physics. Quantum mechanics is used to help us to do chemistry. From quantum mechanics, we get this deduction. I mean, this book is kind of a tough read to see all that. But Hitler pointed this out. A recent poll of the members of the National Academy of Sciences published in Scientific American indicated that more than 90% are atheists. These men and women have built their entire worldview on atheism. They would be exceedingly reluctant to admit that any result of science could be valid if it even suggested that God could exist. I discovered this the hard way when I published my book, The Physics of Immortality. The entire book is devoted to describing what the known laws of physics predict the far future of the universe will be like. Not once in the entire book do I use anything but the known physical laws, the laws of physics that are in all textbooks, in which agree with all experiments conducted to date. Unfortunately, in the book, I gave reasons for believing that the final state of the universe is a state outside of space and time and not material, and should be identified with the Judeo-Christian God. It would take a book to explain why. My scientific colleagues, atheists to a man, were outraged. Even though the theory of the final state of the universe involved only known physics, my fellow physicists refused even to discuss the theory. If the known laws of physics imply that God exists, then in their opinion, this can only mean that the laws of physics have to be wrong. This past September, at a conference held at Windsor Castle, I asked the well-known cosmologist Paul Davies what he thought of my theory. He replied that he could find nothing wrong with it mathematically, but he asked what justified my assumption that the known laws of physics were correct. At the time of the conference, the famous physicist Freeman Dyson refused to discuss my theory, period. I would not encounter such refusals if I had not chosen to point out that my theory's theological implications. As a physicist, I'm aware that quantum mechanics, the central theory of modern physics, is even more deterministic than was the classical mechanics of which Darwin was aware. More than this, quantum mechanics is actually teleological. Though physicists don't use this loaded word, we call it unitarity instead of teleology. That is, quantum mechanics says that it is completely correct to say that the universe's evolution is determined not how it started in the Big Bang, but by the final state of the universe. There's your retrocausality there, John. Every stage of universal history, including every stage of biological and human history, is determined by the ultimate goal of the universe. And if I'm correct that the universal final state is indeed God, then every stage of universal history, in particular every mutation that has ever occurred or ever will occur in any living being, is determined by the action of God. And so I'm just like, yeah, I can't just read stuff like this from respected. And by the way, Tipler was mentioned in my general relativity class. And I'm like, oh my goodness, he is respected. And so what I was trying to convey tonight, I said, you guys, there's no way you can be 100% sure there's no God. And you're acting like it, because if you're an anti-theist, you really are sure that this is the wrong thing. And I said, that has to be a faith statement. That can't be something you prove, because the only way you prove God's non-existence formally is you have to be omniscient. And if that's the case, you're God. And I that's why I said,
hey, if you're Randolph Richardson, you only need to be omniscient and omnipotent for 2 weeks, and then you will believe in God.
Okay, I gotta go, guys. Thanks for having me. I wanted to say
thanks for coming, Danny.
Yeah, and I want to say also, I got married on Friday. Can you believe that?
What?
Oh, congratulations, Danny.
Yeah.
So was this an elopement, or was it like planned?
It was planned. It was planned. I just, I just kept it to myself. But,
Danny, are we in your honeymoon right now?
No, that's what I gotta go. I got a wife now, and I have to do things now. I can't stay. I
You gotta
can't
be a
stay up
responsible
till.
adult now.
Okay, so Danny, the real question is, are you off to consummate your relationship, your marriage now?
Look,
Now
this
that
is
you are now that you're official.
This is a PG stream. Okay.
Yeah, this is a PG stream. Come on,
Okay.
Joe.
Okay, that's why I said consummate.
That's
That
not. You don't hear that word in PG movies.
Hey, listen, you just got married, so you might be having to validate your, it may not be legal, depending on in Louisiana, in your parish. It may not be legal until there's an official.
And I got to tell you something, Danny. The fact you're hanging out with us during your honeymoon here, you're the ultimate nerd, man.
She had work. Okay, she just got back from Lafayette. She had a, that. And if you want to review my anti-theism thing on Rage, y'all should watch that. It's short. Anyways, y'all have a good one. Thanks for having me, Sal.
Yeah, congrats, Danny. Yeah, congrats, man. And thanks for hanging out.
Yeah,
I really appreciate you showing up.
It was fun.
So the other day on the Pudding's channel, he said that he had convinced his wife to clean the kitchen, and now wife, as he said girlfriend, is now wife, and it was so funny. Pudding and the gang were like, they couldn't comprehend this premise of like him convincing his girlfriend to clean the kitchen. Man, it was good stuff. They went into full meltdown over that one. I'm like, the things that get these guys riled up is very interesting.
What was this about? I missed it. I was playing with the chat there. What triggered them again?
He had gotten his wife to clean the kitchen, and it was girlfriend. He said girlfriend at the time, and they were all just like they all went into meltdown over the fact that he'd gotten his wife to clean the kitchen. And it's like, does anything not trigger you guys? Like any semblance of like normal existence is somehow anathema to them or something. It's weird.
Yeah, or traditional values. It's just
that's the thing. It's traditional biblical values that triggers them. Like traditional gender roles, that's going to always trigger the atheist. Because
okay, yeah. And one example I want to point out, I said, okay, so you're on the Titanic, but now we have a woke culture. And now, people are deciding who's going to be on the lifeboats. Is it, in the original, in the historical event, the men stayed and sacrificed their lives for their wives and kids.
Mm-hmm.
What's the woke answer to how this should be done?
Listen, I currently identify as a female child, so I'm going to need to get on that lifeboat.
I mean, and from the woke perspective, like, how do you argue against that?
That's right.
Meghan Markle.
You can't.
Guess what? First come, first serve, bitch.
I mean, I get the feeling.
First identified as the appropriate identity group. I win.
Yeah, I mean, I get the feeling that if a situation like that were to come up today, you'd have a lot of people that would do exactly that.
And then what would actually happen in the real world is whoever is armed,
yes,
will ultimately be the one that makes it.
Mm-hmm.
And there's a very, very strong probability that the demographics that we're currently talking about will not be those people.
Yes, except for the demographic that is armed also tends to be the demographic that holds to old school conservative Christian values that says women and children first.
Well, true. In the context of the lifeboats, I would agree with you on that. In the context of like anarchy and chaos, descending to chaos. Well, case in point, like during all the riots last year, man, some of the most entertaining videos I watched, I mean, just epic entertainment, was when different groups, like little morons, would finally leave the urban areas in downtown, head into the suburbs, and often like into like country towns, and try and do their little shenanigans, and then just get utterly annihilated. And very often by not that many people. There'd be like 30 of the little guys in black, shall we say, and 10 big old country boys. They would just beat the snot out of them and have them run it. The best video I have of all of last year, I just cracked up so hard. It's in California, some little town north of LA. A group of Antifa comes in. They meet at a gas station. The local boys beat the crap out of them. I've been talking, beat them up so bad that like literally knocked them out of their shoes. Okay. And as they're leaving, one of the country the guys from the town picks up the shoes from one of the guys that they'd like not literally knocked out of his shoes. And we're like, hey, hold on, hang on. Runs over, hands him his shoes, and like, hey, put these on because you got a long way to walk. as they're like, I mean, not figuratively, but literally running them out of town. Like, gives him his shoes back. I'm like, oh my, okay, that's too good. That is too good.
Okay.
And then there was another one. It was up in, I think it was in Washington, maybe, but similar kind of scenario, like out in some neighborhood, right? And I guess all the fathers and husbands like came out into their neighborhood armed to the gills, and like a whole crew shows up to like invade their neighborhood, and they're just like, okay, we're here, are you gonna try and come in? Because if you are, we're gonna destroy you. There will be no mercy. You guys can either leave or we're going to annihilate you. You're invading our space. Like, our kids are back there, our wives are back there, you're not coming in. And of course there's a bunch of trash talking from the from the mobsters, and they're like, you're so mean, this is just wrong, we should be able to protest, you should let us protest. And I'm using a high voice right now because like this is how they sounded. And finally, like, one of them tried to like run through into the group of guys blocking the road. They threw him back and then proceeded to chase everybody. They ran them out of the neighborhood and then forced them all to run into a ditch. It was like lemmings. Like, they just angled them and herded them all the way back till they all ran into a ditch and fell on themselves. It was priceless. I'm like, man, oh, this is too good. And then I tell you my experience with them here in Nashville when I went to the one of the presidential debates, the one that was held at Belmont. I guess on video, actually. I'm like walking, and I was expecting there to be more action. There wasn't. It was kind of boring. But when the Antifa folks finally came up, I felt like I was like in the group of middle school kids. And I'm like, so you guys are all like decked out in your gear and your backpack and your mask and you're all black and you're like little ribbons and stuff. You are maybe $120 and like 5'4". And I was standing next to some cops, and we were talking about it and kind of looking at them, and they're like, I was like, so I'm guessing you guys aren't really all that worried about this. They kind of looked at me like, nah, I think we got it. I think we can handle them without too much problem. And I'm just like, yep, I would say so. Like, man, I'm sorry.
That is provided that certain powers that be take the hand off the scales.
Well, that's a very good point. And in that line with that, when the riot that we had here in Nashville, I'm still pissed off about that. Whoever made the order for this, I'm very pissed off about them. So our city hall actually got set on fire, and however, it got set on fire while the courtyard in front of the city hall building had been occupied by riot police. Okay, I'm talking full gear. Okay. Mm-hmm. They're standing there blocking them access to the building. There's a bunch of trash talking going on, but nothing happened, right? Then all of a sudden, they just leave. They literally, in a line, walk away from blocking off the building and go line up in the street, like perpendicular to it, and just stand there and watched the rioters set the building on fire, break all the windows, spray paint, all this other kind of stuff, go in, grab stuff, set, office building, different offices on fire and stuff. And they're just standing there watching it the whole time. It's freaking on video. Like, there's a helicopter flying around. I was watching the aerial view, and I'm like, so they had it completely, like, they were there first. They had it completely accounted for. They leave, watch them burn it, and then like 2 hours later, all of a sudden they like take action, and within like 10 minutes had them completely cleared out.
Mm-hmm. Yep.
And I'm like, who made the order to allow them to do this and just observe them burn the building? And then after they all ran off, they ran down to Broadway and like tore through and set a bunch of bars and restaurants and stores on fire on Broadway. And I'm like, what?
I mean,
who did this? Like, how does this make any sense?
I mean, it's at least it's better than the UK police. At least they didn't run away from them.
Well, that's a good point.
Sal, when you're done there, I want to share a video because I think it's highly relevant to what's going on. It's real short. And anybody who has seen the 10 Commandments, the old 10 Commandments with Cecil DeMille as the narrator, will appreciate the video. It will make a lot of sense. But you're also on mute, Sal, so if you're talking, nobody's hearing you.
All right, I just wanted to share this, and before I forget, gentlemen, we had some business we were talking about that we were kind of not very happy with certain quarters of apologists that are not friendly to creationists at all.
Mm-hmm.
And I just wanted, while the crew is here, because I showed up on Modern Day Debate because James invited me, but I really would prefer to be in front of Christian audiences that are interested in apologetics. I want to hear the other side. Although what Emery said scared me. He said those guys are just some of the fans of inspiring philosophy, and Robert Rowe are kind of just as scary as the atheists, and that's news to me. Yeah. But I'm just going to try to read this quickly. The highlights. I don't know what the date was. April 7th. A medical student questioned microaggressions, and actually he questioned the definition. He didn't question whether the idea was bad. UVA, University of Virginia, branded him a threat and banished him from campus. And let me see. Kieran Bhattacharya is a student at the University of Virginia School of Medicine. October 25th, 2018, he attended a panel discussion on the subject of microaggression. Dissatisfied with the definition of microaggression offered by the presenter, Beverly Cowell Adams, an assistant dean, Bhattacharya raised his hand. Within a few weeks, as a result of the fallout from Bhattacharya's question about microaggressions, the administration branded him a threat to the university and banned him from campus. He's now suing UVA for violating his First Amendment rights. And here's what the student said. "Thank you for your presentation," said Bhattacharya. "According to an audio recording of the event, I had a few questions just to clarify your definition of microaggressions. Is it a requirement to be a victim of microaggression that you are a member of a marginalized group?" Adams replies that it wasn't a requirement. Bhattacharya suggested that this was contradictory since a slide in her presentation had identified microaggressions as negative interactions with members of a marginalized group. That's not really the point. This is such minutia, and they're going to kick him out of medical school. And I didn't realize this happened in 2018.
Well, so that leads very well into the video I'd like to share, because this is not. Let me get the share screen going here, but this is not in any way, shape, or form a cultural phenomenon. This is a religion. And this, I think, will explain why. So, Sal, whenever you're, I don't know if you've approved the share or whatever, but the video.
Here it is. Sorry, I just missed it.
And the people sinned a great sin, for they had made them a god of gold, and they bore him upon their shoulders and rejoiced, saying, "This be our God, O Israel."
And there you have it.
Play it again.
And the people sinned a great sin, for they had made them a god of gold, and they bore him upon their shoulders and rejoiced, saying, "This be our God, O Israel."
And that's a left-handed fist, by the way.
Not surprised. But there you have it, folks. Like, this is literally the children of Israel making the golden calf. I mean, that's what this is. It's a religion. It's a secular religion, but it's a religion. That's why they don't allow you to question anything.
Just like the mangoes.
Exactly.
In Red China.
Well, and this is why you guys heard me talk about this before, but the Sal, for your generation, your demographic, and even I'd say even people maybe 50 up max of maybe like 15 years younger than you. The premise of quote unquote education had a dramatically different underlying benefit, paradigm shift, potential for your life. I mean, and like potential for success and all those kind of things. It was a dramatically different time in terms of the cost benefit analysis, all those kind of things, right? Like the ROI on your education, all those kind of things were, it was true, right? Like if you went to college and you got degrees and you were relatively smart, you could make it, right? If you went and got that education. And now, I'm not saying you can't, but it is no longer what it was.
It's no longer
number one. The return on investment is not anywhere close to what it was. In many instances, people are actually losing money by going and getting an education from a net perspective. They're actually losing money, and then that's before you even account for the indoctrination aspect of it, and the reduction in critical thinking skills and innovative thought, entrepreneurship, forward thinking, creativity, all those kind of things that are being absolutely decimated as a result of our academic, quote unquote, academic institutions. They're supposedly helping with all this stuff. And okay, fine. Like Emory, I know you're going on, you're getting your master's, doing different things because you have an objective of what you want to do, and you have to have those check boxes. Mm-hmm. But let's get real. The vast majority of people don't.
Right. Well, you won't hear any argument from me on this, John. Like I
know. I'm talking in general, kind of to the audience, and it's like I was having one of my sisters is she's 51, and she and I were talking about this, and she was kind of talking like, yeah, I think people my age and maybe a little bit younger were kind of where the tipping point was of like that true difference in potential for yourself, for your life, right? To be truly changed. And it's like when she worked as a pretty high level executive and hiring and all that kind of stuff, and she watched it as somebody who was a decision maker and stuff. And I watched it when I was an entrepreneur and having my business and hiring people, all that kind of stuff. I watched it too. And it's just like, what is happening in society? And the reason I bring this up in the context of the golden calf, the secular religions, things of that nature. Though I think in a lot of cases, our universities are turning into the secular seminaries. And I don't mean it from the religious perspective in the way we view a seminary. I'm talking about in terms of this secular, quote unquote, religion that's happening.
Oh, that's 100% true. That is 100% true. The universities are seminaries in the religious sense, that they are promoting a secular religion of some kind or other, be it purely materialistic naturalism via evolution, which they've been promoting for decades, and now this new woke garbage, which really synthesizes evolution with woke secular thought. Because I mean that's exactly what they are. That's exactly what they are. And the thing is, people will pay hundreds of thousands of dollars to get indoctrinated into the woke cult.
Oh my goodness! At Duke University, it's $300,000 for a bachelor's in gender studies. $300,000, and they're talking about being sex positive and all in gender studies. Well, one of the girls there couldn't afford it, so she ended up becoming a certain kind of movie actress. Okay.
Yes.
I'm trying to be family. That's a family-friendly term I'm trying to use here.
Yes.
What I'm showing here. Oh, by the way, thank you very much for that video that took it from the original 10 Commandments movie. Thank you.
I did not create that. I found that on Twitter a year ago.
Okay. Wow. Go on.
I don't know where exactly it came from now. It's been a long time since I downloaded that, but I mean, that is, I mean, it's gold. So whoever created that is a genius because it perfectly illustrates what's going on.
What's going on? They're giving up something good for something stupid. Mm-hmm. And this is what's happening in academia. So if this is what $300,000 would buy you. Now this was that hoax that Boghossian was in, and I mentioned Boghossian in my debate tonight. He's a hardcore atheist, but he could only tolerate so much stupidity happening in academia. So he and his friends conspired to make this hoax, and they deliberately wrote to these quote unquote academic journals that, when they get their articles published, it helps these professors keep their tenure at these universities that charge $300,000 to teach garbage. So this is one of the hoax things that got accepted in the journal. Other means superior to the natural sciences exist to extract alternative knowledges about stars and enriching astronomy, including ethnography and other social science methodologies. Careful examination of the intersection of extant astrologies from around the globe, incorporation of mythological narratives, and modern feminist analysis of them. Feminist interpretive dance, especially with regard to the movements of the stars and their astrological significance, and direct application of feminist and post-colonial discourses concerning alternative knowledges and cultural narratives. That's what you pay $300,000 to learn. And that was
and not only learn, but get published,
accepted, and published
in the peer-reviewed academic journals that we hear so much about.
Yeah, I mean, if you listen, unless you have something published in peer review, nothing you say can have any credence.
Mm-hmm. The more shocking thing is that those journals have like a really low acceptance rate.
That's actually true.
But that gets accepted. So
it makes it even more significant, right? Like, oh, so mine sucked a lot and I got in. Yours only sucked a little bit, but I still beat you.
And what was really funny, Jordan Peterson, he's not a professing Christian, but oh man, he has great insights, and sometimes I think he says things better than some preachers.
That's not hard, Sal, given some of the preachers that are out there.
Yeah,
you watched
which is kind of our next point. We'll move there. There is this Twitter feed. It's real peer review, and let me just share my screen so people see what I'm looking at. Real peer review, and the comical thing was, he was saying most authors are delighted when their work is talked about and advertised. When they found out of this Twitter feed that aggregates all these peer-reviewed papers, the authors were furious because even they knew what they wrote looked embarrassing. It was so bad. And so here's one example. I had to try to keep the ones, some of them are just so not family friendly. I can't share them, but they were so bad. But here's one. This one, the International Feminist Journal of Politics, winner of the Enloe Award 2014. How unmanned weapons queer the experience of killing in war. Killing with drones produces queer moments of disorientation. Drawing on queer phenomenology, I show how militarized masculinities function as spatio-temporal landmarks that give killing in war its orientation and make it morally intelligible. These bearings no longer make sense for drone warfare, which radically deviates from two of its main axes, the home combat and the distance intimacy binaries. Through a narrative methodology, I show how descriptions of drone warfare are rife with symptoms of an unresolved disorientation, often expressed as gender anxiety over the failure of the distance intimacy and the home combat axes to orient killing with drones. The resulting vertigo sparks a frenzy of reorientation attempts, but disorientation can lead in multiple and sometimes surprising directions, including but not exclusively more violent ones. With drones, the point is that none have yet to be reliably secured, and I conclude by arguing that in the midst of this confusion, it is important not to lose sight of the possibility of new paths and the hope of new directions.
So I understood what was said, but that was the embodiment of buzzword word salad.
Yeah, so remember
Like,
when I
oh,
came
I've
up with
inserted like,
words
I wonder if they have like a filter of like, do I have enough talking point buzzwords per paragraph? Let's do a search filter. Okay, so paragraph 1, I've got 14 buzzwords. Okay, that's perfect. That's perfect. Okay, keep going. Oh wait, we got 600 words in our in this little section, and we've got a 23% buzzword rate. Okay, cool, we're good. Moving on. The that was word salad. That was straight up.
You know,
No
this was from
substance
this
to
was
that.
from
That is legitimate word salad.
this is from a PhD from my alma mater, Johns Hopkins. I said, I can't believe such a fine institution would let garbage like this invade. It's disgraceful, but it's like, yeah, this is happening at all the elite institutions. They're accepting this nonsense. And
And the sad thing is, they would be more likely to revoke your degree for being a creationist than that person's degree for being an idiot.
yeah, you know, Ben Carson, who's a creationist, he was going to speak in my graduation in 2013. I actually graduated in 2012, but because it was kind of an odd month to graduate, I got the privilege to. Because he said marriage is between a man and a woman. Oh my goodness, there was outrage, and he had to back down. He would have spoken at my graduation. I was so bummed.
Well, what's going to happen to it's inevitable at this point. We are on I think with COVID, I think the education bubble is going to burst. A lot of people have kind of this point, like, and that in the chat right there about vocational schools, a lot of people have realized, like, wait a minute, I'm taking classes. I mean, there's lawsuits going on right now against a lot of the universities who refused to. They wanted to maintain the same cost when you're doing everything online from home. And there's multiple lawsuits that have been filed of that. Like, we want a percent. We need a discount. Like, you're not fulfilling what we paid for. Like, and I think that obviously in conjunction with the massive reductions in state funding, just from the capital not being available. I think a lot of the universities are having hard moments of truth, and even though they're still in denial. But I think on to some extent, there's a large enough number of people that kind of having that moment of realization too, of like, wait a minute, what is this I'm paying for exactly? What's the potential return? Like, suddenly it's oh crap, I'd never anticipated something as, black swan as 2020 to occur. I might need to actually be a little bit more practical. Maybe this basket weaving gender studies degree I'm getting, maybe I should actually focus on something that has some like probability of getting hired, right? I might actually need to be able to get a job at some point. And
although, John, I will assert that I think that the moment of truth is hitting the university accounting departments, but hasn't hit the presidents yet.
Well, I would agree with that. But I think that that's going to happen because I don't know if you've seen it, but like the default rates are getting pretty epic right now.
Well, they're just going to forgive student loans, so it won't matter.
Well, yeah. Okay, so here's the thing. In spite of the whole we're going to forgive student loan thing, which is, it's straight up bribery. The student loan debt has tipped, I think it's 1.4 trillion. Okay. To put that in context, that's about $500 billion more than we have in credit card debt. So let's think about this. What if do you actually think it's a remotely realistic thing without causing like massive just financial collapse, right? If suddenly it was like, you know what, we're going to forgive 50% of all the credit card debt in the United States. Like, you're guaranteed to cause a collapse. Guaranteed.
Yep.
And they're going to say like, oh, we're going to forgive. We're talking about $50,000 per person.
Mm-hmm.
50 grand per person.
Yep.
You're blowing through 500 billion in no time. If you actually do this, right? So let's get real. They're not actually going to do it, or they might do it, but it'll be of some it'll be talking point worthy niche identity politics crap. And they won't actually do that much.
They'll do it, but it'll be for persons, quote unquote, of color, and sexual minorities. That'll be who gets it.
Yeah, whatever the at the current time, whatever the talking point.
Basically, whatever the highest thing on the intersectionality pyramid is at that point in time. Whatever that's who will get the forgive the most.
And here's one of the flips of this whole thing that's just blowing my mind is: did you see the Supreme Court, the Appeal Circuit Court? I think it was Circuit Court right now, ruling that it's okay to discriminate against Asians because they're smart.
Yeah, I saw that.
It's like, hold on. So Stanford, it's okay for it's okay for Stanford. So if you follow the whole deal with like Stanford and their like discriminatory admissions process. Mm-hmm. Okay, so basically, freaking Asians are smarter generally, and been from a familial perspective, they've been trained better, just conditioned better for academic success, right? Well, they decided to skew the admissions against Asians, like from a racial perspective. Mm-hmm. Like, oh, they scored higher on their SAT, ACT, or they got better grades, yada yada yada. We're not going to let them in because they're Asian, and we're going to let people in of other races who have inferior scores and inferior qualifications and inferior grades. Mm-hmm. We're going to actively discriminate against more qualified people, again, just to reiterate, because they're Asian ethnicity. Well, they filed a lawsuit about this. They've got discovery. It was in the discovery process. It was clearly, the evidence was there beyond doubt. Like, yes, no ifs, ands, or buts about it. Finally, they even admitted they were doing it and then somehow magically won in court that justify that yes, it's crazy. Okay that they discriminate against Asians. And I'm like, and seriously, the part of the ruling was that they weren't like, I forget the exact wording, but it was basically, well, they come from higher income demographics and higher rates of success, therefore it's okay to discriminate against them.
And that's very, right. That's very left wing. And I wanted, not that I would ever do this, but it was funny. Someone said, well, they could apply. Since people can change their gender, you can also declare you're another race and just take. I was kind of laughing at that. I said, yeah, that would be poetic justice.
Well, and here's the irony. There's been multiple professors who have gotten fired for doing exactly that.
Whoa.
You even seen that, Sal? Oh, man. No. Okay.
I knew of one woman at the NAACP. She turned out to be
well, yeah, there was that. Oh, yeah, she was the head of a chapter, I think it was.
Yes, Rachel.
No, there's also been multiple professors who did the whole identity thing, and like basically tried to personify a minority, and ended up getting busted and getting fired. It's hilarious. It's priceless. Like seriously, you put your hair in braids, and like got a serious tan, and now you're declaring yourself to be like XYZ minority, and you don't. Okay, so hang on, so. As a conservative, I'm the racist, but you're literally impersonating one. I don't know what to say here at this point. Like, talk about some projection, folks.
Well, to be fair, they may have been told to do this because, like, my brother is in the military, and when he graduated from his degree program, he was told, even though he's quote unquote white, he looks Hispanic, and he was told, mark your name down as Hispanic, check the box as Hispanic because you'll have a better chance of getting promoted. Now he didn't do it, obviously, because he's Christian, he's not going to lie. But how many other people are doing that deliberately because they know their best chance of getting promoted or their best chance of climbing the corporate ladder or getting a tenure at the university is if they're a minority?
Well, case in point, like when my first stint in college, my idiotic self managed to be a complete moron and jack up my scholarship. And so when I was trying to figure out, I ended up getting back on like probation. And anyway, long story short, in the interim to all that, I was trying to figure out how to pay for it. And I remember going into the financial aid department and stuff. And very, very long story short, I was informed that because I was a white male, I basically didn't qualify for anything.
Yep.
As there were people next to me, like left and right, they were getting like rubber stamped with basically no. It was like fill out a piece of paper, boom. Okay, you got a Pell Grant. Here you go. And I was like, hold on, why? What? I just watched all this happen. Like, what are you talking about? And they're like, oh yeah, you won't, yeah, until you're about 24. Come back when you're 24 and we should be able to help you.
Yeah.
And I'm like, hey, I was like 19 at the time. I'm like, huh?
Well,
At the time, I didn't really, I mean, I saw what was happening, but it didn't really hit me a true level of understanding of like what I was observing, right? Because I was just pissed at the time. Like, why are all these other people getting it? And you're telling me because I'm a white guy I can't? Like, what the hell what are you talking about? And for me too, this when I talk about people about a lot of the issues that are happening now, like I had spent at this point, I'd only been back in the state. I mean, even though I'm an American, I'd only been living in the States at this point for like a year. And so this whole, a lot of this crap that we hear about now and identity politics and all this kind of stuff, for me was just completely like, I didn't even know what the heck was going on. Like, this is bizarro world. Like, and so for me, as you know, over the last 18 years, since I've been in the States, I've been able to, I've observed the dramatic pivots towards conflict. And, you know, the whole aspect of slow boiled frog. I think a lot of Americans, because they didn't have that dark dichotomy that I did, right? From, even though I'm an American, grew up in a different country, you know, all that kind of stuff. Like, I came back and I had a kind of different starting point, if you will. And I know how it was when I came back, and then how I see how it is now, and what's happened over the years. And it's kind of blown my mind at the regression into all this identity politics, racial conflicts, all these different things that were way better when I first came back to the States. And it's like, you would think it would be the reverse, right? But no, it's not. It's getting dramatically exacerbated. But
Sal's been trying to play this clip from Jordan Peterson for a few minutes here, so why don't we let him play it? You're on mute, Sal. So.
Oh, actually, I was realizing it's old news now because we've seen all the Antifa and BLM riots. But it was a shock to me when I first saw Jordan Peterson at McMaster University, and they would not let the guy speak. They were hounding him, blowing horns, and he had I didn't see anything problematic of what he was saying. But I think it had to do something with Bill C-16 in Canada, and he didn't like language being forced upon people. He said he said that, you know, if someone wants to be called by a certain pronoun, he'll use it. But he said it's not ethical to be forcing this on people. And that caused a campus-wide explosion of protests. And that's when I began to see, I said, this is scary what's happening to our culture. We can't have a civil discussion. Everyone's going to be deplatformed. And this kind of feels like this anti-theism. We're not going to let you state your case. You know, we're going to.
That's what I called, I was questioning Amy about. Like, okay, so what's your end objective? Like, how are you going to ostracize? You remember she stated that she wanted, I asked her, like, are you going to try to erase atheists? She said, no, I'm going to reduce them to the equivalent of a flat earther. And I'm like, okay, well, how are you going to accomplish that? Yeah. And then she just kind of dodged around and didn't want to act. It's like, okay, if that's your end objective, you have to have a strategy to accomplish this. And you're talking about the ostracization. I'm too tired.
Othering. There you go.
The othering of the current majority of the planet, right? Yeah, and let's think about that. You have to think about that for a second. From the anti-theist perspective, they want to completely flip the worldview of the majority of humanity. And, you know, one of the points that I make on a regular basis about the Machiavellian types, right? And like how the average human doesn't really think, because that's not how they think, that, like, no, people aren't there's not people out there who are actually trying to conquer the world. Like, they're not actually trying to gain all power over me. Like, people aren't really like that. I mean, there's a few bad people, but they're not. That's not how it is. Yes, it is. This is a historically documented premise. There's a reason for this. And which is why I say in the context of and again, I'm not planking every single person who calls them an anti-theist in this context, but I would be extraordinarily stunned if there aren't people in the quote, anti-theist, unquote, segment that are actively and strategically attempting to execute that strategy. And I would say institutions like the Freedom from Religion Foundation, as an example, and all the lawsuits they're filing in schools across the United States. I mean, oh wait, you can't pray before a football game. We're going to file a lawsuit. Separation of church and state.
You can't pray by yourself, away from your team, in the public eye. You can't even half an hour before a game starts. You can't wander out to the middle of the football field and take a knee for 5 seconds. You can't do that. That's religion in the public square.
And really, a lot of them, and I take Amy at her word that she's anti-theist, but a lot of them are really anti-Christians.
Yeah.
Because they had all these Christians trying to immigrate to the United States, they would deny them. They'll open our borders, make them porous. But when Christians have legitimate asylum problems, where the Muslims are trying to kill them, and these poor Christian women are asking for asylum in the U.S., it's like, nope, not going to give it.
And yet we're shipping males 18 to 34 in fighting age, right? That's the whole point of that. We're shipping them in by the busload, both to Europe and the United States now. I mean, when you look at what's happened in Europe, Europe has been conquered from within. It's truly fascinating what's happened to Europe. And what I think Americans don't realize this, the majority. If you put every military of every country in the European Union together, they would have less than 1 million soldiers. That's every country combined. Okay.
Is who Demolished Doctrine? Who is he? Do you know who he is?
I do not.
Never heard of him. Well, you didn't make the link public.
So yeah, that's Richard. Yeah, never mind.
My sincere apologies, sir.
Peace and respect, gentlemen. Sorry I'm late.
Oh, no worries, Richard. How you doing, man?
Better than I deserve, boss.
Hey, so nobody noticed this, but I chopped off most of my beard yesterday. I'm jealous you kept yours. You're just getting getting bushier and bushier.
You probably have a woman to entertain. I don't.
No. Actually, so last year, at this time, I decided I was gonna just let it go for a year, and it hit 88 degrees yesterday, and I was like, okay, it has been over a year, and it's getting freaking hot. It's time to go trim it. I actually took pictures. I took pictures though. It was pretty funny. I documented. I did a little video before I walked in, okay, so I guess it's gonna be the end of my my little extravaganza with my crazy beard. And I tell you what, it's the most bizarre thing, and you'll appreciate this, Richard. The driving down the road, it's like I keep going like this and expecting to be able to. It's not happening. It's feeling kind of weird. I'm like, man, I don't know. I have to readjust.
Feel a little naked, don't you?
Yeah, I do. I'm definitely feeling a little naked. It's kind of a weird feeling, to be honest.
I watch you guys debate, if you can call it that.
What did you think? It was weird. There's no doubt about that one.
Yeah, you're welcome for the view. Are you going to mirror that to your channel where I can give you a view?
I probably will.
Yeah, because I'd like to give one of you guys a view for that. Anyway, I mean,
thank you.
It takes a lot of patience to do something like that against argumentation so horrible.
And Sal, this is why I didn't watch it.
Against argumentation that's so what?
Horrible.
Oh.
Okay, I'd love your opinion on this. I didn't feel like they actually really presented much of anything, from a actually coherent argument perspective.
Hey, they had feelings and they had reasons, feelings and more reasons after that. So there.
They were straight. I think I do credit them. They were straightforward enough to say, if we had the evidence, we'd be Satanists. I'm like, okay.
What does that mean?
There's a verse in the
Basically,
Bible.
if God exists, then Satan must also exist. Therefore, they would follow Satan.
Well, what it was is she's alluding to the verse where in the New Testament where it said the demons believe, but they believe only to tremble.
Right.
She omitted the tremble part. So the demons believe. She said she'd be that sort of theist. She would be like the demons and believe in God, but she would be following Satan.
Aren't they assuming that some God exists? I mean, just in the statement, and then is unable to explain itself.
I don't know. I just remember that was the part that just stood out. I'm just like, yeah, there's no hiding with their. If they could get some other sort of God, they might be okay with that. But they really did not like the Christian God.
Well, I wonder what's the Christian God in their minds, because I've talked to Nakasuchi repeatedly, not to Amy, but to Naka several times, and what he's always presented to me is an inconsistent view of Christianity that doesn't comport to the Bible.
Yeah, I would say that's a very accurate.
So what is he talking about that he's rejecting? Does it even know?
All right, I think I have to head out now. You guys have fun with the rest of the show.
Hey, Godzilla Freak, thanks for joining. Thanks for being a part of the stream, sir. God bless. Have a great day.
Yeah, you too.
I mean, I love Nakasuchi. He's one of our brothers. He's a child of God, just like any of us are. But his view is like a, I don't know, Neo-Baptist Mormon. I don't even know what to call it. It's some kind of weird conglomerate that doesn't exist anywhere.
And who's
except in his mind. The Rage, his Native American name is Nakasuchi.
Well, I don't think he's a brother in Christ.
No, I'm talking about an eventuality, not the present situation.
Oh, okay.
I mean, I have great faith in our Father that He will be effective, that His word will happen, and because of that, okay, consider this. What do you guys think about this argument? It's an evil nation that needeth a sign. The signs are for an evil nation. The signs are described in end times. They are not to bolster or turn believers to believers. That doesn't even make sense. But if they're things to be witnessed by this earth, they're obviously for the evil nation. In which case, grace.
I'm not even sure I understood that argument, to be perfectly honest with you. Of course, it might be because it's 2 o'clock in the morning.
It's a good excuse. It really is.
So are you saying that the things that are happening in the end times will ultimately be, not for all, but for many, will be signs to turn to God?
I mean, obviously they're written down, Old Testament and New, in foreshadowings and direct messages, right? And then would the signs of end times make a believer change their mind? Nope.
You would think so.
Okay, but are you arguing then that these signs of end times are going to prompt everyone to be born again?
Everyone's a big word. I'm just going to say a larger than the present percentage.
Well, that's not hard, given the present percentage is very small. But the argument that you're putting forward here really sounds borderline universalist.
I don't know why you say that.
Well, you called the particular individual that, and I can't pronounce his Native American name, but the raging atheist, someone a brother in eventuality, and I have to ask the question at that point: how can you say that with certainty if you're not a universalist?
Well, of course, what's persuasive to me is not persuasive to all, but I've spoken to him, I don't know, 30 plus hours. And I think that, an evidential series like the 7 signs of the coming of the Lord, now that he knows what those signs are, would be very persuasive to him. I think he would accept it.
I don't know why LPP dropped out, but this isn't a topic I'm interested in.
Oh,
Richard, sorry.
No, that's okay. I'm willing to talk about whatever you want to talk about. I find your
Okay.
brain interesting. That's why I'm here.
Oh, very kind of you. I wanted LPP. You're welcome to come back in. I don't know what happened. While I have you, Emery, I'm actually running out of gas too. But
I hear you. It's 2 a.m.
I wanted to say this whole thing about Robert Rowe, and I don't know what their views are, and I was saying that I would prefer to be in front of their audiences to argue the creationist case, because I'm not going to be spending. I don't want to be spending too much time with the atheists. I mean, if they come on my channel and ask sincere questions, I'm open. But this, like that time I spent with Andrew Cumming.
Right. Andrew and Danny are different cases than he who shall not be named.
Yeah. But when you told me that the crowd that follow inspiring philosophy and Robert Rowe are kind of just as bad as the atheists, could you elaborate? That was actually kind of disturbing to hear. It's not that I'm saying that you're wrong, but
okay. Okay. Some of them are, again, is you're gonna get different people, you're gonna get some that are gonna be like Andrew and are gonna be more than happy to have a conversation, and you're gonna get some that are going to I don't know if you heard my conversation with Rob. It was pretty clear. His view of scripture was garbage, and there are a lot of people who are like him, who have very, very low opinions of scripture and think you're an idiot because you don't.
Yeah. Richard, where do you stand on the creation evolution spectrum?
I think that if evolution is true, our Father did it.
Okay. Thanks. Emery, so this, tell me about the crowds that are following them, because this is not good if large numbers of Christians are subscribing to this, although that wouldn't surprise me.
There are large numbers of Christians that are surrounded. Now, some of them are kind of like just there because they say stuff that sounds biblical. Like some people will latch on to things like kind of like Eric Metaxas did with Joshua Swamidass, where he latched on to Swamidass because Swamidass said historical Adam and Eve. And that's all, I'm sure that's all Metaxas heard, because he's very ID, but he latched on to Swamidass, who's a TE. So I'm sure that's all Metaxas heard was historical Adam and Eve. Yes, somebody's defending that.
Yeah, not really, right?
No, that's not, right. Yeah, exactly. He's not actually defending it, but that's all he heard, right? So there's some people like that where they don't really have a strong position on it, but the nerds, the ones who are into it, they're pretty toxic. Like when I went after LP, not LPP,
Rob Rowe.
IP. Well, I haven't done that. Video is coming out tomorrow because I took the half hour from John's stream and walked through it for over an hour for my podcast this week.
I probably am not as some of my yak brethren will not like me saying this because I'm not quite as dug in the heels. Mm-hmm. But my stance is Rob Rowe, inspiring philosophy. What you're doing is you better be 100 million% sure you're right. Same for Swamidass, mm-hmm. because what you're advocating is destroying people's faith.
Yeah,
and people will walk away because you're trying to persuade them. There are a lot of people that interpret the Bible as mm-hmm. either old earth creation or young earth creation. Mm-hmm. And if you start advertising and you start saying that their science is flat earth, you better be 100 mm-hmm. million% sure your facts are correct.
Yeah.
Because you've just destroyed someone's faith. And if you're in the wrong, it's better the millstone be hung around your neck mm-hmm. and you be thrown into the sea, because that's what the scripture says.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and I'll take this a step further here. They have a very, very low view of the text of scripture. I got Rob to admit that he thinks that the Bible teaches a flat earth, but the earth's not actually flat. So, in other words, there's mistakes in the Bible. Which, if there's mistakes in the Bible, why should we trust it when it tells us about sin and salvation? Right? You cannot argue that position. You can, but you can't do it. That's Sentinel Apologetics, Godzilla. But I got him to admit that. because he said, yeah, that's Heiser and Walton. They all believe that. Like, this is just like, this is a very, very low view of Scripture. And I also got him to admit that he thinks, and he's not the only one, that you have to have a scholar to tell you what the Bible means. In other words, those of us who don't speak, Ugaritic and these other ancient Near Eastern languages, we have to have a scholar. We have to have someone like Walton or Heiser or himself to tell us what the Bible says, to help us understand the Bible. Because I asked him that question, and rather than answer it, his response was, well, how ironic, because without the scholars, you wouldn't even be reading the Bible in English. And I'm like, well, no. It was 3:00 in the morning, so I missed this, but I should have caught it. That's not the same thing. Translation is not interpretation. And the minute it becomes interpretation, it stops being translation, because you're now imposing your view on the text.
And I wanted to ask, does Inspiring Philosophy and Rob Rose subscribe to Walton?
Yes, both of them. Oh,
man.
That's
you know what, standing for truth here?
Yeah.
You need to debate. I hope you'll debate these guys. I think I'd probably lose my temper. And I'm a nice guy, but I probably would lose. I lost my temper with Rob Rowe. I lost it a little bit. I'm usually civil.
Well,
but he kept interrupting me. Yeah.
You heard me. I had to yell at him to get him to let me talk. So,
yeah. And he was saying I was dishonest. And I was like, you cut me off mid-sentence. I was giving an explanation. I said, I'm not talking to you anymore.
Yeah. Yeah, and there's a reason I don't engage with him. And I told him that to his face. Like, I won't engage with you because you do stuff like this. But the thing is, he's written commentaries on the Bible, so he thinks he's an expert. Him and IP, like, that's what you're getting into. Now, IP's not quite as toxic as Sentinel. Like, Sentinel's followers and Sentinel are really, really toxic. IP's not quite as toxic. But IP again is another Walton guy. He's gonna cite Walton. He's gonna throw Walton out there as his. I know. It's pretty bad.
And yourself into. What I'm going to tell these guys? I said, okay, there may be some. Okay, let's just grant we disagree on this. My point again stands. You better be 100,000,000% sure you're right.
Well, okay. See, they don't believe that. Like, Walton actually wrote an article for BioLogos where he actually said that. Well, just because and he didn't quite say it this way, but what he said essentially was, just because I hold to a position and the position you hold contradicts it, doesn't mean that both our positions are wrong. And I'm like, what? Like, this is garbage. This is nonsense. It's non-logical. It's just pure utter trash.
Okay. So now this, and I don't mind this being public. I actually said, hey, LPP, how can we steer the sheep away from them? I specifically asked, I said, what sort of advertisements can we do on their websites and YouTube channels to get them to drop to the right places?
Yeah. Well, the thing is, like, they're promoted by popular Bible teachers. Like, if you know who Mike Winger is, Mike Winger promotes Inspiring Philosophy. They cross-promote one another. And I have tried in Winger's comments to try to get him to consider a young earth, try to get him to read some Answers in Genesis material. He just won't do it. He won't touch it.
I'm sorry. You know what? That's what LPP said. That he's more willing to do paid advertisements, and he wanted to put. He said, "I'm going to be putting banner ads." He was referring to another situation where he was going to be putting banner ads on his opponents, and like, good on you. And he's willing to put his money to announce.
Yeah.
I'm
not big enough to advertise with YouTube, but
well, I just wanted to say I did kind of like the
audacity. The audacity, yes, I do very much. But Winger is a full old Earth, Andrew. He's full old Earth. He isn't TE. I don't think he's an TE. I think he's just full old Earth. But he works with Inspiring Philosophy quite a bit. They cross promote one another. And like. But thing is, popular Bible teachers like them drive to, and like, I had an encounter, and I talked about this on somebody's stream. I don't remember whose stream it was. It may have been John's stream. I don't know if you were there. No, it was Graham's. It was Graham's stream. I talked about this on Graham's stream the other day, and you weren't there, so you didn't hear this. So I'll go through it again. I had an interaction with someone on Twitter who goes into the name Inspiring Christendom, and he put up, you know how they on social media they'll do, you know, this whole meme on how it started versus how it's going type thing. Well, he put up two images which he labeled how it started versus how it's going. The how it started was Answers in Genesis, and the how it's going was a stack of books that included books by N.T. Wright, Bart Ehrman, Michael Heiser, and a few other well-known theistic evolutionists / bad arguments for Christianity / pagans. And so I just left a little snarky comment. I don't usually interact with this guy because he's pretty toxic too. But I'm like, so from biblically faithful to borderline pagan. Got it. And this descended into a argument over Wright's view of the atonement, which I'm not going to get into here because that's not the purpose. But the point is, as I pointed out to him, if you hold to some of the positions of these authors, you're not borderline pagan. You are a pagan because they're heretical positions. Like Wright holds some pretty heretical positions on certain issues. But the thing is, I had his followers just like had a field day with me. And I'm like, guys, I'm just pointing out that, like, even if you don't like the young earth position, AIG is biblically orthodox. N.T. Wright is not biblically orthodox. Like, this is not up for debate. And Ehrman is a pagan. But none of that matters.
And you know, I need, because I came from an old earth background. I was a TE for maybe a couple years after I became a Christian, and then old earth creationist. Even to this day, I think I've been longer term. More of my life I spent as an old earth creationist. So the reason I feel kind of kinship with the old earth creationists is they don't believe a lot of the garbage of abiogenesis. They definitely don't. And you have someone like Stephen Meyer, who we did talk. He said, I'm progressive creationist. I think God had to have worked miracles to make the Cambrian explosion. I actually respect him for that.
Right.
And whereas these TEs are just like, do you guys even think about the science? I mean, there's, you know, I'll credit Cy Gart with this. He thinks abiogenesis had to be a miracle. I'm like, yeah, you're getting at least one part of it really right, because you're a lot better off than Swami Das, who's defending the RNA world. And but with respect to old earth creation, there are not a lot of good reasons to believe in abiogenesis. But with old earth creation, just from a physics standpoint, because that's my background, I said, yeah, you know, I was telling God, I said, you know, you could take the laws, accepted laws of physics and chemistry. You could show that abiogenesis would require a miracle.
Yeah.
But we can't do that. We can't take the accepted laws of physics and chemistry and show that we solved the distant starlight problem easily. And that's what I've been trying to say is I try to tell the young earth creationists, I went specifically to Johns Hopkins to work on the distant starlight problem and radiometric dating. And the challenge is, we're not able to use textbook physics as easily on these problems like we do with abiogenesis. Richard, please.
What's this expression you're using, the distant starlight problem? What does that mean?
One problem for if the stars are really, really far away, and the speed of light has a finite speed, and if something's far away enough, it's like it's going to take more than 6,000 years for the light to travel. And we can invoke things like variable speed of light, which I'm sympathetic for. And they have stuff like, they have like 12, there's so many theories out there. But my point is we have to almost appeal to very non-standard interpretations of physics or actually invoke new physical laws. Whereas we don't have to do that to refute evolutionary theory or abiogenesis theory. We could stick with, and that's what I've been trying to tell my Yek brethren. I said, you know, I think the OEX, most of them have told me that I know personally. They said they'd be young earth creationists if you could give me a working model. And I said, you know, I totally understand where you are, because I am working on the model, among other things. With abiogenesis, it's settled. It's like, you know, we have all the proof we need. But for the distant starlight, it is a big deal. And I ended up working in biology because that's where there was a lot of harvesting there was a lot of good stuff to help the creationist cause there, and especially this year with James Tour coming out and just calling out the entire industry as practically, if not delusional, they're fraudulent.
Yeah, you better hope they're delusional or else they're liars.
Fake science. And so this fake news thing, there's been fake science.
Yeah.
And it's really bad. I wasn't willing to call it that until I saw James Tour just annihilate what was going on. And I said, I can't believe that this is getting published. It's so corrupt. Unbelievable. And for the readers that are new to all this, or the viewers, the argument is we have a random prebiotic soup and life came out of it. What they'll do is for some of the chemicals of life, they'll make a 90-page recipe of processes to make certain chemicals. It's very sensitive to change. And they'll say, this proves it can happen in a random environment. I'm like, you guys how can you say that? Your procedure shows you need so many careful steps in the right order at the right time. And if you violate, they didn't report what would happen if they changed the recipe. And I said, that's a big red flag. And you're representing this as random events can cause this. And I said, this is like saying, oh, let me take you to all the Boeing 747 factories and you get to see how they manufacture all the parts. And then you say, with a straight face, this proves a tornado going through a junkyard can assemble a 747. I said, I'm exaggerating deliberately here, but I said, yeah.
I mean, you have a point. I mean, he has a point there, Sal. Like, you're not actually exaggerating that much. Like, it's a pretty good analogy. Except, to be fairly fair, you might actually be simplifying, because I think the cell might be slightly more complicated than a Boeing 747.
Yeah, at least slightly.
It is possible to get some certain temperature, sure. And it's possible to get some other variant temperature, absolutely. And it's possible for those two temperatures to happen pretty quickly to each other, sure. When you get down to the 50th step of certain temperatures and certain reactions in certain environments, and in that order, you're already talking about astronomical numbers, and you're nowhere near accomplishing the goal.
Yeah, and they're putting all these sorts of very specialized man-made chemicals and catalysts, and they're using these things called like Rayonette reactors and a degassing equipment. And
I found one of those in a pile of leaves last week. What's the problem?
Yeah. And this, what they call these high-performance chromatography systems. I'm just electrophoresis, and I'm just like, how does this model an Earth that doesn't have all this equipment?
Yep.
So
as Tor said, where's the vacuum pump on an early Earth?
Yeah. Oh man, and he would just tear into say. He said this reaction's not going to happen in water, and they're claiming this this reaction happened in an ocean. What are you going to do? Pump out the ocean? I mean, he just had that sense of humor. Before I say goodbye, Rich, and so I'm probably going to close the stream just because I'm running out of gas. We started this at about 9 p.m. Can you tell us what's your background, Richard? I mean, how did you get interested in this? And
I was an anti-theist till age 42 in 2012. I saw some facts in the Bible that I could not deny. I'd never noticed them before. I'd never seen them. And because of that, my conversion was probably about 20 minutes, something like that.
Wow. Now my theological views are orthodox, would be considered Orthodox Christian, or I mean, I subscribe to like I lean toward Reformed evangelical. I mean, I was just curious where you're coming from.
Gosh, I don't have a label.
Okay.
I don't know what to tell you about that, boss.
Well, I appreciate it.
I believe in Yahweh is the Father of our Savior, Jesus Christ, who not only saves us, but sets the perfect example.
Well, thank you. So, Emery, maybe I'll give you the last word. And I really thank you for your faithful visits to my after shows. You showed up when you were really sick for one of my after shows for like Matt Dillahunty, and I'm grateful for that.
Well, I appreciate you having me, Sal. Like, this is like one of those things. Like, it's just kind of a routine in my week. Unless I have a test, I'm showing up on a Sal after show. But so I appreciate you having me. I appreciate you letting me come and talk. And like, I know I don't always do a ton of talking, but it's a good place for me to come and be able to interact with people. Because I'll be honest with you, like being a graduate student in secular biology, and when you're a creationist, is a very, very lonely and very, very nerve-wracking route to walk, because they find out what my beliefs are, I'm gone. So being able to come and talk to people who actually agree with me and not have to hide what I believe, it's a great encouragement. So thank you for having me. I appreciate it.
All right. With that, I'd like to thank all the viewers who've visited us today and also watched the debate on modern day debate. And we'll see you all later. Take care and God bless you.
Have a great night, Sal.